Wow. Well, today we're walking into another one of those hearings where the words sound dry on paper. Air Force budget request. But buried inside these budget hearings is where you really find out what this government actually values, okay? Because budgets are priorities. Budgets tell the truth when politicians won't. And right now, the United States is standing in one of the most dangerous geopolitical moments in its history. Tensions in the Middle East are boiling over. The Strait of Hormuz situation has the entire globe economy nervous. Military spending is climbing. Americans are struggling financially at home. Yet here comes another massive defensive budget request asking for more aircraft, more operations, more readiness, more overseas posture, more expansion. So tonight, I'm not just listening for numbers, I'm listening for honesty. What exactly are we preparing for? How much is this going to cost the American people? Are we funding defense or funding endless escalation? And why does Congress always seem capable of finding unlimited money for war, posturing while acting broke when it comes to health care, housing, education, or ordinary working families? Because these hearings matter more than people think, okay? This is where military leadership comes before Congress and explains what threats they believe are coming towards us, where they want to position forces, what weapon systems they want to expand, how much taxpayer money they expect Americans to hand over or fork over to this war. And let's be honest, after years of failed wars, intelligence mistakes, and contractor profits, and trust us, bro politics, the American people have every right to be skeptical when Washington starts talking about bigger budgets and more money. Now to be fair, national defense matters. I get that. A country has to protect itself. I get that too. But oversight matters too. Accountability matters too. And Congress is supposed to ask these hard questions, not sit there like a ceremonial audience clapping through another blank check. So tonight, so tonight, not tonight. This was yesterday. No. So today we're going to watch closely the next budget hearing. Who dodges the question? Who gives straight answers? Who sounds prepared? Who sounds political? And whether this hearing is really about protecting the American people or is it about protecting, well, I ain't going to say that, protecting this president. Let's go, y'all. Let's go, y'all. Let me pull it up for us. We ain't that far behind.
The Department of the Air Force. I want to thank the members for their hard work and dedication as we've worked through the dozens of hearings and briefings necessary to inform our approach to this year's National Defense Authorization Act. I also want to thank the department for their cooperation as we've conducted this critical oversight function. I welcome our witnesses and thank them for their service to our country. For too long, we've underfunded defense, and now we're seeing the consequences. Our munitions are low, and we don't have enough aircraft and autonomous systems to ensure victory over every adversary. There have been unacceptable declines in readiness, and our defense industrial base has shrunk and is no longer capable of rapidly scaling production. That's why I'm so pleased to see the president is requesting a significant increase in the budget for the Air Force and the Space Force. This budget puts an end to the old divest to invest strategy and has done nothing but pit modernization against sustainment.
See, they asking for more money. We can't get health care. We can't get nothing in this country because all out an assault on using the military and this expertise they call. Now we are in a crisis with the money and they're asking for more money. Wasn't they asking for $1 billion or $2 billion or something like that a couple months ago, 2 or 3 months ago? Now they want more money. There won't be nothing left for us or our grandchildren. There won't be nothing left if they continue to get this money the way they keep getting this money. All because they don't want a ceasefire or they don't want to compromise with Iran. You started this shit. Y'all started this shit. Now the American people are in it to be to the end, to the detrimental end of this country.
The result of several years of that strategy is an Air Force that suffers today from unacceptably low mission capable rates while it continues to wait on the delivery of modernized assets that are still years away. This budget includes a 23% increase for operations and maintenance, crucial funding required to better sustain our legacy systems. The budget also invests in modernization with a 54% increase to develop and procure critically needed capabilities. It will enable us to accelerate key deterrent capabilities, including Golden Dome, B-21, and Sentinel.
I told you, to the detriment of this country, Republicans always start wars, they always crash the budget, and they always give tax cuts. This is irrefutable. This is irrefutable. And it's always to the detriment of this country that we go to war. So I'm against war. I was against the war when George Bush did it. I was against the war when Donald Trump did it in 2017, 2018. I was against it now. So I'm against the war to the detriment of us not being able to get any kind of country agenda, healthcare. We can't get any of those things because we're spending too much money on the war. And we don't even need to be in this war. Has nothing to do with Donald Trump. Has to do with the fact that we shouldn't even be here.
Very pleased to see the budget request for,
and they don't want to turn around.
Recognizes its growing importance as a warfighting domain. It enables the Space Force to increase its support to Joint Force and our combatant commanders. And it funds new mission areas like defending our space assets and breaking red kill chains. We cannot afford to be complacent when it comes to developing our capabilities in space. Our adversaries are well aware of the importance of space-based capabilities and the advantages they provide. I also want to highlight the increase in this request for munitions and industrial base. These funding areas are especially critical to restoring American deterrence. We began some of that work last year with funds in reconciliation and the multi-year authority in the NDAA. I hope to hear about the Air Force's progress in implementing that authority and increasing production. Finally, I want to hear how you plan to use the acquisition authorities given to you by this committee to make sure that that money is in the request will be well spent and accelerate capabilities to the warfighters. As we have seen recently in Operation Epic Fury and Operation Absolute Resolve, our air and space forces are central to the success of the Joint Force and our national security. Their personnel, capabilities, and readiness are crucial to our ability to prevail in conflicts of today and to deter our adversaries moving forward. I look forward to working with my colleagues to deliver a budget that will enable our airmen and guardians to continue to successfully fulfill their missions. Before I close, I'd like to thank General Saltzman for his many years of dedicated service and congratulate you on your upcoming retirement. With that, I yield to my friend, the ranking member, for any opening statement he may have.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start where you ended off and thank General Saltzman for his service. He's been our Space Force Chief of Staff at a very crucial time, sort of the growing of the space.
So we're gonna listen to opening statements, and we're gonna get right into it after they give these opening statements. See what their priorities are.
Space Force and your leadership has been just incredible in fighting through those challenges. Hasn't always been easy, but I think you've put the Space Force on a very good path. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the chairman and former Representative Jim Cooper for their leadership in creating the Space Force in the first place. The theme of posture hearings has been really a continuation of the acquisition reform bill that we did last year. What we're really interested in is innovate faster at scale. How do we get there? The chairman's right. We have critical shortages in munitions and capabilities. So how do we figure out how to innovate faster and get to scale on that? And the Air Force and the Space Force are crucial to that. Obviously, the Space Force is the centerpiece of a lot of that innovation. Secure communications is crucial. Space is going to be a huge part of that. It's also becoming an incredibly important domain in order to project power and be able to defend our space assets, as we know. So we want to learn more about how Space Force is fitting into that. And then on the Air Force side, unmanned aerial vehicles are becoming more and more capable, more and more crucial to what we're doing. How does that mix with our plans for the F-47 and fighter aircraft in general? So I want to know how we're learning from that. On the Golden Dome piece, I think the technology that goes into Golden Dome is, we were doing it already. I mean, basic missile defense is crucial. Space is going to be a key part of missile defense. My concern on Golden Dome is that we envision some perfect system to perfectly protect the entire United States of America, and we wind up spinning ourselves into the ground trying to accomplish something that at the end of the day is unachievable. Even Israel, for all of their capability, protecting a tiny little small space, some missiles get through. So how are we going to build the systems that don't make the perfect the enemy of the good, that enhance our capability in terms of missile defense and protecting areas, but don't imagine something that really isn't achievable? And that sort of comes down to the last point. This is I think probably the only point of disagreement that I have with the chairman, and that's on the budget. Yeah, if we had more money, things would be better. And you could walk through the entire government and make that statement. You know, we have, I don't know how many tens of millions of people without health insurance in this country. We have an education system that isn't where it needs to be. We have a very aging infrastructure, certainly roads and bridges and airports, but water and sewer and all manner of different things. And many of those things are way behind as well. We also have our debt at over 100% of GDP, I think for only the second time since the end of World War II. We do not have an infinite amount of resources. And imagining that we do, I think, gets us into a real problem of trying to do more than we're capable of, just in general, even if we were doing it. But it also, is just unrealistic given where the budget is at. So I'll close, with my second point, which was innovate faster at scale. What I'm interested in, how can that achieve our objectives in a more cost-effective manner? Because as frustrating as it is not to just be able to have as much resources as you want, that's the world we live in. So we have to figure out, how can we build the systems? How can we find systems that give us an advantage? We've seen that in our counter drone mission. I was reading an article today critical of the Pentagon for, the classic shooting down a $30,000 drone, with a $3 million missile. But now we have a $15,000 system, the MIROP system, that's doing the same thing. We innovated. We got to something that achieved it. And how much money is that saving us? That enables us to do more and meet our national security needs. So I hope we'll hear about that as well. And with that, I yield back.
I thank the ranking member. Now I'll introduce our witnesses. First, we have the Honorable Troy Mink, Secretary of the Air Force. General Kenneth Wilsbach is the Air Force Chief of Staff, and General Chance Saltzman, Chief of Space Operations for the Space Force. Welcome to all of our witnesses. Secretary Mink, we'll start with you. You're recognized.
Absolute resolve and epic fury. They do it perfectly.
We're going past those opening statements, and we're going to get to the questions. Yeah.
Thank all of you for those opening statements. I'll recognize myself first for questions. Mr. Secretary, I want to start with the area that you touched on, and General Saltzman just spent the last 2 minutes of his comments on, and that is acquisition. I was obviously pleased to see the significant increase in the Space Force budget. As this service has matured, it needs those increased resources to operate in space and support the joint force. But to make sure that every dollar is spent effectively, the service must be laser focused on acquisition efficiency. To that end, as you are implementing the reforms passed by this committee and mandated by the department, are there any legislative changes you still need from Congress to further improve acquisition efficiency?
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate the question. Yeah, so as I stated in my opening comments, the end state is we want the PAE structure we have, the portfolio acquisition executive structure we have, to have essentially the same authorities and same responsibilities across the entire Air Force. Similar authorities that were given into legislation to SDA and some others. So we would like to actually take all the acquisitions, whether it's SDA or any place else, and put them all into a common PAE structure. And we're looking for a little help to be able to do that. Because in the end,
do you have some language in mind that you want to tender to us?
We can provide that.
I would appreciate it.
Provide that. Essentially, what we want to do is give the same level of flexibility to operate at speed and deliver capability rapidly to all the PAEs across both the Air Force and the Space Force. So we're looking to do that. In addition, I think there are some additional authorities relative to multi-year procurement and those sorts of things that will make it easier for us to execute those types of authorities. And I think we're looking at potential language to suggest on that too. But those are probably the two big things.
Great. Well, I would offer to you that one of the things that I've heard from the private sector is they like the new PAE system, but they are encountering, while there's good support at the top where the PAE is, in the bowels of the worker bees, there's still a culture that's requirements focused and hasn't broken away from that. So I would ask you to be mindful of that as we mature that new structure. Um,
If I
Oh,
could, Mr.
go ahead,
Chairman,
please.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, on that, yeah, I was out at, out talking to, I think probably about 2/3 of the Space Force's PAEs last week. And that was a concern of those two, is how we manage that requirements process. So we're doing a lot to structure the PAEs and give them the authorities. But in line with that, we're also looking at how we do budgeting and requirements, the budgeting and requirements process within the department to streamline that as well to get at that point.
Yeah, fewer requirements, the better. Next, I want to ask you about how the Air Force has implemented DERPM structure and is ensuring that General White is able to execute on his direction to deliver critical capabilities such as Sentinel with emergency,
Yeah,
with
General,
urgency.
yeah, I feel a bit fortunate in that both the DERPNs we work closely with, General White and General Gutlein, two of the DERPNs are two of the best acquisition officers we have in both the Air Force and the Space Force. So I'm pretty happy about that because they are, in both cases, responsible for some of the most important programs that the Department of the Air Force has, not just Sentinel, but F-47, 21, B-21. So it's critically important that we have a tight relationship with them, and we do. I made sure that Dale sits like 100 paces from my office. I meet with him regularly to make sure that we are tightly coupled. He's getting everything he needs and that he's delivering what the department needs to execute mission in the future. So I think it's working well.
Great. General Wilsback, I'm a big proponent of unmanned platforms, and I'm interested, speaking of the F-47, I like that we're moving to the 6th generation fighter. When are we going to make the next leap to optionally manned or remotely manned tactical fighters?
Thanks, Chairman. I'm a fan of unmanned as well. In fact, for Epic Fury, perhaps maybe the most valuable player was unmanned. And this is the MQ-9. And so we've made many strikes. I don't want to say how many because the number is classified, but no other platform is even close to the MQ-9, which is an unmanned platform. So we get a lot of utility out of them and don't put our folks at risk. We're probably not quite at the state of autonomy where we can completely replace the entire force or even the fighter force with unmanned. And as we bring on collaborative combat aircraft and we integrate it with the F-47 and F-22 and F-35 to begin with, there's still some level of human interaction to task that automated platform. There's enough in artificial intelligence and machine learning inside of the collaborative combat aircraft to, once you give it a tasking, for example, go attack this series of targets, it can go do that with the tactics, techniques, and procedures that are inserted in the software. But you still need a human to make those sorts of decisions.
Yeah.
We're not quite there yet.
Well, and that's why I said remotely operated. It keeps the human in the loop, but we don't have to have a person in the fighter.
Sure. And so we're realizing that already with our already unmanned platform. CCA will expand that to a degree because, for example, the MQ-9 doesn't really have autonomy. It's remote.
Exactly
piloted.
right.
CCA will have autonomy, and I've actually had a chance to operate the software in the simulator. It's very intuitive. It's highly capable, and we are going to be able to put extreme pressure on any adversary that would go up against us with F-47, F-22, or F-35 in combination with the CCA, because not only will we have that automation and not put our folks at risk, it also increases the mass that the adversary has to deal with.
Right. Well, I'll leave it at this. We have to start thinking about that remotely operated fighter jet, in part because we want to not have to put a fighter pilot at risk, but the technology already exists. We're demonstrating it at present. But the cost of these platforms is reduced dramatically if you don't have to accommodate a human being. And I just want, getting to the ranking member's point about we got to start thinking smart about spending money. I just want us to start thinking about it. And with that, I will yield to Mr. Carvajal for any questions he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the witnesses for.
We finna see what the president had to say a moment ago. What was he talking about? The president. Hold on. Oh, okay.
As we all know, remembering the men and women who never came home from war. They gave their lives not for recognition or politics, but for this country and something bigger than themselves. We can never repay that sacrifice, but we can make sure that it is never forgotten. And we can make sure that families that they left behind and the men and women who continue to serve are supported in a real and meaningful way. And that commitment doesn't end with when the uniform comes off. So in Utah, one of my constituents, Terry Scow, has continued to serve as a role model in the veterans advocacy. He was instrumental in reopening a state veterans house and office. He helped create 4 new veterans homes in the state, and he even inspired his own sons to serve. He's making sure those who carried the burden of war don't have to carry it alone. That's what honoring service looks like. Not just remembering the fallen, but standing with those who came home. And that's exactly what House Republicans are focused on. Last week, we pushed forward and passed the Milcon VA Appropriations Bill, the first bill of the fiscal year 2027, because taking care of our service members, veterans, and their families should always be the first thing that we do. This week, we're continuing that work with common sense legislation to strengthen veterans' benefits, protect those who served, and deliver on promises we've made. Because this is what common sense leadership looks like. You honor sacrifice not just with words, but with action. And that's where a clear contrast is. Our Republican priority will always be to be putting government ahead of Americans. Our priority is the American people, the American family, the working family, the veterans family, and the like. Bottom line, we will always stand for those who stood for us, not just on Memorial Day, but every single day. And with that, I hand it over to, out of the great state of Texas, Mr. Jake Ellzey.
Thank you, Blake. It's indeed an honor to be standing in front of you. I'm not worthy to be able to talk to you today on behalf of my fellow veterans and those who didn't come home, but I hope that my words honor them and their families. I spent 20 years in the world's finest Navy as a helicopter and fighter pilot, and then I got to serve here, one of only 11,000 Americans. It is indeed an honor to be talking to you today. You know, as Blake said, we passed the Milcon VA bill 400 to 15. So when you out in the audience today get to speak about what we do and don't do here, I want you to keep in mind that while there's clickbait out there all the time about how divided we are, understand this one thing, that Americans come together. I don't know who the 15 were who decided to vote no on this bill, but 400 Americans in the House of Representatives, Republican and Democrat, chose to honor and serve our veterans. $900 million going to advanced medical care, $2 billion going to improving our facilities in the VA, Second Amendment rights for our veterans in there, 400 to 15. We do good work in here. Also, as Blake mentioned, we got a bill on Thursday and Friday addressing benefits for survivors and veterans' Second Amendment rights. But since we are on a Memorial Day, I would be remiss if I didn't mention to you, as we go about our business every day, and we've got a weekend coming ahead of us that is full of joy and sales, I want to point out a couple of people. When I deployed with Morgan Luttrell, my brother, in Iraq in 2006, I was with Team 5 as a JTAC. This young man right here, Clark Schwedler, I'm reminded of him every day, and I hope to honor his service how I conduct myself up here. I wear him on my wrist. I chose this picture because Clark Schwedler didn't have anybody but that dog. He had his parents, but he lost his life, gave his life for both the Iraqis and the American people on April 6th of 2007. He didn't get to come home. I chose the dog picture because he brought that back. His teammates brought that back to him, and his parents got to keep that dog. But I want you to say his name either loudly or quietly to yourself, Clark Schwedler, because that's what Memorial Day is about. On the same operation on April 6th, Mike Day got shot 27 times. 27 times, 16 to the body, 11 in his plates. The plates fell off as they took him off. He got knocked out by a grenade. He came back, but he didn't come home. And in 2023, he took his own life. So I just want to point out that when we're talking about what this week is about, over 1 million Americans have given their lives so you and I can go about life, so that I can watch my son play baseball and play catch with him, so I can take my daughter to go see her next school, next college, and so that I can come home from very difficult weeks here and hold my wife. Keep in your minds, say their names, keep them in your memories on this Memorial Day. I yield to Tom Emmer.
Thank you, Jake. Too often we forget the price of freedom. It is thanks to the bravery and sacrifice of the men and women in our military that we get to wake up each day in the greatest country on the face of the planet. That's why House Republicans are committed to delivering for our nation's veterans, their families, and their surviving spouses who've made the ultimate sacrifice. This week, as you've heard, we're going to vote on 2 bills that will do just that. American heroes and their families should not have to worry about making ends meet. Congressman Tom Barrett's H.R. 6047 is a much-needed, long-overdue expansion of benefits for severely disabled veterans and veterans' surviving spouses. Sadly, they have not seen an increase in benefits in over 20 years, even as the cost of living has continued to go up. This is unacceptable. This week, House Republicans will right this wrong, ensuring that no veteran or veteran's family gets left behind. House Republicans will also vote on the Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act led by VA Committee Chairman Mike Bost. It's simple. Veterans deserve the same constitutional rights as every other American. Right now, veterans who get help managing their benefits can be stripped of their Second Amendment rights by Washington bureaucrats. Washington bureaucrats. No judge, no due process, no court ruling. This isn't just insane, it's anti-American and it's an affront to the Constitution. Thankfully, Chairman Bost' bill will protect the Second Amendment rights of our nation's veterans by restoring due process. It's common sense, it's constitutional, and it's time to get it done. As we approach Memorial Day, a time for our nation to remember the men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom, House Republicans are proud to stand with our veterans and their families because they so bravely stood for us. And with that, I turn it over to our leader, Steve Scalise.
Thank you, Whip. And really want to thank my colleague, and dear friend, Jake Ellzey, for those warm words and really kind of reminded everybody what Memorial Day is really all about. Why we pause to pay tribute to those men and women, especially who gave their lives, who did not come home. And obviously, you know, some of them served with them, and it wears even heavier on your heart, but it wears on all of us. And so we remember them. We will say prayers for their family, but we're also taking action. And the bills, as the Whip mentioned, that we're bringing to the floor, Chairman Bost's committee, the Veterans Affairs Committee, is dedicated to making sure that we're properly taking care of our men and women in uniform, but especially those who don't make it back. And the fact that the survivor benefits have not been adjusted for decades is an embarrassment. And we correct that oversight that has gone on for way too long by bringing that up to where it needs to be to help those families who don't have their loved ones with them, but still have bills to pay, have kids to raise. And that's an important bill. The Second Amendment protections of all people who should have those. It surely should be those who fought to defend the rights that we have. They surely should not have less rights than American citizens who did not participate in our military. And so that bill at least gives them equity and parity to make sure that our veterans are not treated less than every other American citizen when it comes to Second Amendment rights. We're bringing a number of other bills too. Of course, we're waiting on the Senate to finish the reconciliation bill. They are going to go through the vote-a-rama tonight. Hopefully they get it all wrapped up by tomorrow. We stand ready to move as soon as the Senate is finished. And we adjusted our schedule to be here longer for that. The housing bill that we're going to be voting on today is really, really important to lower housing costs for all American families. This is a bill that French Hill, the Financial Services Committee, did incredible work on to make sure we got the policy right. Clearly, there were some differences between the House and Senate. You see, many of those problems were addressed in the changes and the amendments that Chairman Hill is bringing forward in the bill that is on the suspension calendar today. I think you're going to see a very strong vote, which shows that all of us want to see lower housing costs, but we need to change laws. We need to simplify some of the laws so that we can lower those housing costs. This is something that every American in this country is going to be happy to see, to have lower housing costs. And then one of the bills you're going to be able to watch a really interesting vote on tomorrow is the Women's Museum. We're bringing a National Women's Museum. Shouldn't be controversy at all, except for the fact that the Democrat Women's Caucus has now come out against a women's museum. And you would ask why. Well, that doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't. But it shows you how crazy the other side is right now and how void of common sense the Democrats are. There is one condition that is in that bill that they took objection to. Now you think about it. Everybody for years had been asking for a women's museum to be created. And in the creation of it, they said the only people that can be honored in a women's museum are biological women. And because that word biological women is in there, every Democrat woman came out against the bill. So let's see how they explain that to people back home who would say, what world are you living in where you don't want to pay tribute to women? And we're going to have that vote anyway, but it just shows you how far their party has strayed. You saw that vote last week on Law Enforcement Week. A week again, pay tribute to our men and women in uniform who keep our communities safe. The police, a lot of them were up here from all over the country. We had a resolution by Zach Nunn to pay tribute to our men and women in law enforcement. Unbelievable that 86% of Democrats voted against that resolution. So when people go back home and say they support the men and women in blue, you don't support them when you vote no on a resolution that pays tribute to our men and women in uniform. So the defund the police movement is alive and well in the Democrat Party. When 86% of Democrats last week voted against cops, it was disgusting to watch. But I think police and anybody who supports men and women in uniform all across the country were watching that vote. One more example, the sharp contrast between Republicans moving common sense legislation and Democrats going off the deep end of crazy, totally void of common sense. With that, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. I want to talk a little bit about what's ahead of us, but wanted to just take a moment to reflect on something that just happened. It was on Sunday a few days ago. We had the Rededicate 250 event on the National Mall. It was really an extraordinary thing. Many thousands of Americans came out to participate in that. An historic event. It was a welcome opportunity to recommit ourselves to the cause that our founders fought and died for 250 years ago. And sadly, too many young Americans are no longer taught the moral and religious foundations of our extraordinary country. And that is the source of our greatness, the reason we became the most free, most successful, most powerful, most benevolent nation in the history of the world. But evidently, some in the mainstream media missed all that history lesson as well. And I just wanted to comment, it was brought to my attention yesterday that MS Now, formerly MSNBC, mocked me in a big segment they had. And the reason they mocked me was because in my remarks, I led the prayer of rededication on the mall. I stated the self-evident truth that our rights do not derive from government, they derive from our Creator. And they had this entire segment about how ridiculous that was and what a crazy notion, and isn't Johnson such a crazy fundamentalist, et cetera. The best part is I was literally quoting from the Declaration of Independence. So let me take this opportunity. I want to just direct my friends in the mainstream media to the second paragraph of our nation's birth certificate, the Declaration, which remains the most foundational and consequential sentence in all of American history. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. They're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among those the rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It shouldn't be too much to ask that the people who talk about politics on TV on a network that millions of Americans tune into have a basic understanding of America's political foundations. I hope this serves as a friendly reminder to every American that the best civic education is
not from your favorite TV anchor or late night host. Okay. It comes from our founding documents. You ought to go read the Declaration and the Constitution and the Federalist Papers and the other foundational texts that shape and guide our country. And as we approach the 250th birthday of the greatest nation in history, I encourage all of us to revisit those founding documents. It's really important. It's really important. The founders believed that in order to keep a constitutional republic, to maintain the republic, you had to have an informed and engaged electorate, the people, a government of, by, and for the people ourselves. The people have to be engaged. They have to know basic civics. They got to know their foundations. And quite clearly, we need that review. At least some of the media do. Okay. All right. Regarding this week on reconciliation, on housing, on Women's Museum, et cetera. We've got a very consequential week ahead of us here. There's a lot going on, as you know, and the leadership team's covered it here. Republicans are still on track to complete the reconciliation process on time by the June 1 deadline that we set. And Leader Scalise talked about that. We're going to fully fund immigration enforcement and border security in our reconciliation bill. Again, it's worthy of note. That is rather a shocking proposition. The Democrats don't want to have anything to do. Think of it. They don't want to give $1, 1 penny to border enforcement, border security, and immigration enforcement. So sadly, we've got to do that ourselves. We don't yet know exactly what form that bill will take because it's still going through the parliamentary process there and working through the committees and the floor vote, but we'll process it as soon as we get it, and we're anxiously awaiting it in the House. We expect that that's going to happen here by Thursday. That's the hope. House Republicans also voting this week on that bipartisan bill to lower the cost of housing for working families. And we worked really hard on that, and it has been bipartisan. Increased housing costs and lack of quality supply are two issues that impact nearly every American family. And the House will vote tomorrow on a strong bipartisan package that'll put more American families into homes. It's going to increase the supply, and it's going to make it easier for local banks to deploy capital in their own communities. And all those things are going to help with the cost of living, help with affordability. It's going to be a big thing for the people. The House and Senate remain closely aligned on getting the best possible product to the president's desk, and we'll do that in very short order. On the Women's History Museum, I'll just say we're going to take that up. Nicole Malliotakis, representative from Staten Island, worked very hard on this and drawn a big coalition of people. I think it has almost maybe 270, 280 co-sponsors at this point. The Smithsonian American Women's History Museum. Now, Nicole and others have done a lot of good faith work for years on this. 230 bipartisan co-sponsors is the actual number right now. But suddenly, in spite of that, Democrats are all backing out. And you heard Leader Scalise talk about this. It's just an incredible thing. Why are they backing out? Simply because the bill reinforces an objective truth that a museum for women, get ready, should showcase only women. Okay, that's the concept that got them all riled up. Here's the language of the common sense amendment that was added to the bill that made all the Democrats run for the hills. Quote, the museum shall be dedicated to preserving, researching, and presenting the history, achievements, and lived experiences of biological women in the United States. The addition of the word biological made them all run for the hills. I mean, if that's controversial in the Democratic Party, we're in serious trouble. The party that purports to support women demanding that the museum include biological men. The Democrats may be okay ceding control of their party to the most radical far left people in the country, but Republicans are not going to be any part of that. We're not going to stand for it. And neither are the overwhelming majority of Americans who still believe in common sense. Finally, Memorial Day, I'm so grateful for Jake Elsey, our colleague. He was a Top Gun pilot. He looks the part, doesn't he? Straight out of Central Casting. He's got the great voice and all that. But the fact that he comes up here and speaks from the heart and talks about all those who served and paid the ultimate sacrifice is a really serious thing. And we give credit where credit's due. And I want to thank our Republican House Chairman, Mike Bost, and Representative Tom Barrett worked on these two bills that will safeguard the constitutional rights of American veterans and deliver meaningful relief to Gold Star families. At a time when the world faces grave threats, not the least of which include Iran, the largest state sponsor of terror, every one of us is keenly aware that American strength and freedom are not free. And they're paid for by the selfless service of military personnel who serve our nation every single day. And we're reminded of that fact. We're going to pause to remember those and their families, those who paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom. We benefit from their heroic work every day, and we should never take that for granted. Real quick word on the primary results last night. That's the big political news, of course. last night, I'm just in a nutshell. I talked with the president late last night after everything all the dust was settling over all the elections. And we talked about how his endorsement is the most powerful in the history of politics. I mean, anywhere in the world. I think it's just a phenomenon. I wasn't involved in the Kentucky primary, Thomas Massey's primary. The leadership team wasn't because he's an incumbent, but the president certainly made his opinion known, and I'm not surprised by the results there. The president knows what's at stake in this fall's elections, and he and I need conservative patriots here ready to help us continue saving America. And that's why we're working hand in hand to defend and grow this House Republican majority. I'm convinced we're going to do that. I'm thrilled about 3 more of our endorsed candidates who are going to do just that. They advanced last night: Ralph Alvarado in Kentucky, Houston Gaines, and Jim Kingston in the state of Georgia. All 3 of those are going to be great members next year as we defend and grow this majority. And at the same time, this is what's really important for everybody to be paying attention to. There's an effect happening around the country, and y'all have heard me summarize it this way. The best way to describe it in short summary is that there are many Mamdanis popping up all around the country running for Congress as Marxist, openly as socialist Marxist. And it's a race to the far, far, far left. And as we say all the time, this is not our father's Democratic Party. This group has been taken over. I mean, the Democratic Party's been totally taken over by the far left, and Hakeem Jeffries and the team here can't do anything about it. In fact, Republicans are the only ones that can stop them from destroying our country, and that's why we must and we will win. But they continue to nominate some extremely radical candidates last night. Even people, there's a candidate in Pennsylvania stolen from his own family, and he won the primary on the Democrat side. They're going to lose these swing districts. And in summary, we'll go to questions, but in summary, this is what it boils down to. You heard the leaders say it. You've heard all of us say this over and over and over. This is a contrast election, okay? And at the end of the day, the American people have to just look at this. It's contrast between common sense and crazy. We're going to ask the people. I mean, as all of our candidates and our incumbents are out in the field, they're just ask the questions. Do you want to keep the team in charge who secured the border, got dangerous criminal illegal aliens out of your communities and brought down crime, that got American energy dominance going again, that returned us to peace through strength, that has put all the conditions in the economy to make your life better and bring down the cost of living and higher paychecks and higher tax refunds, and got men out of women's sports and little girls' locker rooms and ended trans surgeries on minors? Do you want to keep that team, that party in charge of Washington? Or do you want to turn it over to the people that want to do the opposite of all those things I just described? It's a serious contrast. It's a serious chasm, a widening chasm between the 2 parties that didn't exist here even 20, 30 years ago. But this is where we are. And you got to keep America on track. And that's what this election is about. Okay, a few questions. Yeah, for sure.
With Massey's defeat yesterday, Cassidy over the weekend, possibly John Cornyn next week, is the message for Republicans that you have to be in lockstep with the president or you will face defeat? And also, given the amount of money that was spent in Kentucky, that is likely going to be spent in Texas and elsewhere, is that a wise choice to use all that money against Republicans when you have such a fraught battle for the House?
The message is that we're advancing America's first agenda, the America First agenda. It's about bringing the country back. And America is back. And that's because we've been running an agenda, again, based on common sense that achieves so many of those things I just said and more. We need people here who understand that, who are not, trying to carve out their own lane and do something that's destructive or, counterproductive, I think, to the agenda. And that's what's happened. I mean, that's the message. We have gone out very careful with candidate recruitment to recruit patriots, people who are selfless, many veterans who are coming in to serve, people who have been accomplished in their community, done things selflessly, servant leadership in their community. They've been accomplished state legislators or local legislators, and accomplished business persons. We have an incredible array of people. The one thing they all have in common, they're not monolithic. They don't agree on every issue, but they believe in the core principles of our party. What is the Republican Party? What is American conservatism? What is the Republican Party? It's individual freedom, limited government, the rule of law, peace through strength, fiscal responsibility, free markets, and human dignity. I don't ask much more of anybody, but you got to hold the core principles that made us the greatest nation in the history of the world. I never ask anybody to violate a core principle, but you have to you have to give up on some of your personal preferences sometimes because you're in a deliberative body and you have 434 colleagues, okay, other people. So that's the message. It's nothing more than that. The president has the strongest endorsement in the history of politics, as I mentioned. But we don't demand loyalty to the president. What I demand as Speaker of the House is loyalty to our core principles, the principles of our party, which are the principles of America, and that's what we're standing for. Jake.
What do you want to see happen here? And if it doesn't end up in this bill, are you going to do a supplemental for Secret Service? Because they've said they need money regardless of what happens.
Well, look, the funding for Secret Service is essential. The president has now survived a third assassination attempt in just a few years. We're obviously in a heightened threat environment. This is a different time than it's ever been, and so we need all of our law enforcement adequately funded. Certainly Homeland Security, and certainly Secret Service. So we'll look at that. I don't yet know, as I said, I don't know what will be included in the second reconciliation bill, the final details of it. We should know that in a few hours, and we'll process what we get, and then we'll look at the next issues. I mean, what they're asking for to harden the security at the White House and elsewhere to make sure that Secret Service can protect the president, the vice president, and the executive branch officers is a critical function. That's not a partisan thing at all. I mean, everybody has to acknowledge it's necessary and important, and we'll figure out how to make it happen. Manu.
Would it be okay if January 6th rioters, the ones who were convicted, even some of the ones who attacked the police, had access to this taxpayer dollars, this $1.8 billion in settlement that the DOJ has created, the settlement fund? Would you be okay if they had access to that money?
We don't know any of the details of that settlement fund. The acting attorney general, Todd Blanche, testified yesterday, and he gave a lot of detail, and I'll just defer to what he said because he obviously knows a lot more about it than I do. He said, let me tell you what he said. He said they are setting up a fund to compensate all Americans who have been the subject, the target of lawfare or weaponization of the federal government. Again, that's not a partisan proposition either. Everybody should support that. He did not say who will be eligible. There's many details to be filled out on that, and I'm not going to comment on it until that. I'm not going to comment on that until it comes out. Yes, ma'am.
Congressman Tom Keene has not been seen or heard from by the public for months. Does he owe his constituents transparency? And for your purpose, are you able to pass partisan legislation like this?
Yeah, look, I talked to Tom. It's been a few weeks ago now on the phone, and he sounded good and optimistic, and we're expecting him back here soon. He's had a medical issue, and he's going to be fully transparent and disclose all that. I mean, that's what he told me. But I don't even know the details, and I have to respect that. It's a member's personal privacy on whatever matters they're dealing with. But we expect to have him back soon. We've missed him. He's a great member of Congress. He'll get reelected because he comes from a long history, a legacy in his family of faithful public service. Things happen to people individually in their health and otherwise, and they deal with challenges and they get right back. That's what champions do. Tom Keene is one of them. Proud to stand with him. He's going to get reelected, and we look forward to welcoming him back here very soon. Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
So now we got an explosive hearing going on. So the Southern Poverty Law hearing is going on right as we speak.
One of the field sources, number 42, chair of some crazy hate group, the Southern Poverty Law Center highlighted him on their webpage. He's bad, he's evil, send us money. Is that right?
Yes.
Did they tell their prospective donors they were paying this guy?
No.
They didn't tell him. Did they tell him they were paying him $140,000?
No, not to my knowledge.
So they said, let's stop the racists, even though we're paying him to be racist. That was their pitch. But they didn't tell him that, did they?
No, they did not.
Is that appropriate, Miss Wiley?
I'm sorry, which part? Sorry.
All of that. Is that appropriate to say, tell your donors, this is the extremist of the month. This hateful racist guy is really bad. Send us money, but not tell those donors who you're taking their money from that we're paying this guy $140,000. Is that appropriate?
Well, we have public reporting that over a dozen donors actually said
I mean, a
that they
simple
spent the
question.
money
Field
as
Source
intended.
42 got 140 grand from the Southern Poverty Law Center, was featured on their webpage as extremist of the year or month or whatever they call these bad guys. And they were paying him and they were gating money. Is that appropriate? Simple question.
And donors have supported it, and they keep trying to send
So
more
it is
money to
appropriate.
the Southern Poverty
No,
Law
no, no, no. Is it,
Center.
is that technique appropriate? That's what I'm asking.
That is not unlawful to say that people have done
I didn't
X,
ask if it
Y,
was
or
lawful or
Z.
unlawful. As you said earlier in your testimony, the court's going to determine that when they go to, when they go to trial. What I'm asking you, is it appropriate?
As I said, the donors have spoken. And in fact, they're trying to send more money now, and their financial institutions refusing to send the money.
Is the Alliance Defending Freedom, is that a hate group?
I don't know. I don't do designations.
Well, they've argued 16 cases before the Supreme Court, won 16 cases before the Supreme Court. They stand for traditional values. Southern Poverty Law Center labeled them a hate group. Are they a hate group?
I don't know them, and I don't work on the
Well,
designations.
here's one thing.
I'm
is-
here to talk about
let me
the
ask you
impact
this.
on
Is
civil
Jane's
rights.
Revenge, is that a hate group? Because the ADF, they didn't firebomb anybody, but Jane's Revenge did. ADF is labeled a hate group. Jane's Revenge isn't. I want to know how you would label.
I'm not here as a person who designates groups. I'm here to talk about the impact on civil rights.
Okay. Mr. O'Neill, you think any of these field sources were double dipping? I mean, during the
That woman is actually a person that's in Congress. She's actually a congresswoman. And I'm trying to figure out why did they have, well, I guess she's speaking on behalf of the Southern Poverty Law Center, but maybe these are, maybe this is an in-house thing. I don't know. Let's see. What is this explosive hearing about? What's going on?
Biden, Ray, Garland administration, the Justice Department paid a bunch of confidential human sources, a bunch of them. We know a bunch of them were at the Capitol on January 6th. 4 went in the Capitol. And I'm just wondering if the same entity, the Justice Department under President Biden, paying these confidential human sources, who was working with the Southern Poverty Law Center, having quarterly meetings with them, consulting with them, giving them FBI data before anyone else could see it, having them train their prosecutors. I'm just wondering, do you think it was out of the realm of possibility that the Justice Department was paying the same sources the SPLC was paying?
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I have no information or knowledge that they were double dipping. I would say that Stephen J. Ross, who is author of The Secret War Against Hate, which is about the history of informants that Jewish groups had placed in some of these violent groups back, decades and decades before the SPLC ever existed. He said that neither the ADL nor the American Jewish Committee nor the Anti-Nazi League did anything like highlighting informants online as in extremist profiles while also funding them.
Yeah. Last question will come to you, Mr. Perkins. In your opening statement, you talked about how it was just worse than the SPLC because how they've put themselves out there or become the standard of help from the government, I think, in becoming the source of the standard on evaluating and determining what groups are hate groups, what groups aren't. But it's bigger and broader. It has things. But I think the real thing here is how closely they worked with the government to carry out what they were trying to do. And the reason the Biden administration embraced them, I think, so fully was politics, simple politics. You agree?
Well, there are members of this committee that were endorsed by SPLC. They had a C4 was involved in elections. So they were not just an umpire. They were a player on the field as well. So how can they be objective in determining who is a purveyor of hate and who is not? I mean, they had a stake in this. But to your point about their engagement with government, it goes much further than the federal government and the FBI and the Department of Justice and the Department of Defense, which their material was in briefing to the members of the military. But they also continue to have their Learning for Justice, which is about 500,000 educators across America, and bulletins to local law enforcement. And I happen to know because the agency I was with, the sheriff called me and said, "Hey, we got a bulletin that says you're a part of a hate group."
Yep.
And he was laughing.
Yep.
But that is the reach that they've had. This is the hub. They're the hub, but they're spokes that go out. And
No, I think that's an appropriate metaphor. My time has expired. With that, I recognize the gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. O'Neill, have you ever heard the name Michael Donald?
I have, yes. I'm very familiar with the case.
How about you, Mr. Perkins? You don't know? You've never heard of him? How about you, Dr. Swain? You've never heard of Michael Donald before? You can cut your mic on.
I'm not sure, but maybe if you give a little
Well,
more
he was
information.
the 19-year-old African-American black boy down in Mobile, Alabama. He's the son of Beulah May and David Donald, the youngest of 6 children. He was in community college at the time while working part-time for a local newspaper. And on March 21st of 1981, he was lynched. You've never heard of that before?
No, I have not.
Well, then you
I
did
don't
not
recall
know
that.
then that the SPLC was responsible for filing a lawsuit against the United Klans of America, whose members were responsible for lynching Michael Donald. You did not know that the SPLC had sued along with Beulah May Donald
I have published.
and received or obtained a judgment that ran the United Klans of America out of business. You weren't aware of that?
I was totally aware of it. In fact, I
Okay,
used
well, let me
data
ask you this
from
then. Let me ask you this. If you were aware of that, you know that they have been effective since then in running a number of Ku Klux Klan organizations out of business through lawsuits, correct?
In my.
You're aware of it, Mr. O'Neill, aren't you?
Yes, I'm actually very aware of that
and let
case
me- and
because
let
the
me-
SPLC
okay, all right,
edged
well,
out
hold on,
Beulah
let me
May
ask-
Donald,
let me
who
ask-
wanted to make a
let me ask you
video about
this.
it.
Well, I
You
didn't get to
said-
respond.
Hold on now. You've said that Charlottesville was a catalytic moment or a fundraising moment, both of you all have said, for the Southern Poverty Law Center. You're aware of the fact that the Southern Poverty Law Center actually forwarded to the FBI information about Charlottesville before it even happened, before Donald Trump said that the Ku Klux Klansmen down there and the anti-Jewish folks, anti-Semites, were good people. You were aware of the fact that SPLC provided information to the FBI about that. Isn't that correct, Ms. Wiley?
That is correct.
And they have been very effective at suing organizations, anti-Semitism, anti-racism. They have been a thorn in the side of the racist, who I'm sure sat up in their graves. Robert E. Lee, Nathan Bedford Forrest, the former Confederate general, founder of the Ku Klux Klan, and others, Stonewall Jackson. I'm sure that they stood up in their graves and saluted when Trump was elected and when he took office, because on the first day, he eliminated all federal efforts to remedy the impact of slavery and racism in America. They call it DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Trump has tried to stop that, and the United States Supreme Court has gone along with him in ending enforcement of or the ability to enforce the Voting Rights Act, which is one of the ways that you, Dr. Swain, were able to get the right to vote. I don't understand it,
May I
Ms. Wiley.
respond?
Can you tell me why it is that folks today are claiming that we have no racism in America and the only extremism we have is through left-wing groups like the SPLC, and they're targeting the SPLC? Can you tell us why?
We've just seen an outright attack on all the gains of the civil rights movement for the past 60 years. And I can only say that I will never be able to explain it, but at a time when hate crimes have doubled in this country, gone up 100% since 2015, where the rise in anti-Semitism, the rise in hate against transgender people, Black people still remain the #1 largest racial group subject to hate crimes, that we have to talk about racism, transphobia, all of the violence that too many of our communities are experiencing, and no one, including any of the groups here, should experience violence.
And Trump.
I
and
think
Republicans
the
on
gentleman's
this
time,
panel
the
are trying to
gentleman's
have us
time has
deny
expired.
reality, which
With
we
that,
all
we go to
see.
the gentleman from
I yield
California,
back.
Mr. McClintock. I thank the gentleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Eric Hoffer famously observed that every great cause becomes a movement, that becomes a business, that becomes a racket. And I think that sums up precisely the matter before us today. SPLC is a private organization. They have a right to speak and influence the public policy discussion. No one questions that. What they do to malign innocent groups like Turning Point USA and Family Research Council and others is despicable and hateful, but that's freedom of speech. But freedom of speech does not include the right to defraud donors. It does not include the right to commit bank fraud. Those are the allegations in the grand jury indictment. We've got a legal system that I trust will sort those charges out. And it also doesn't include the right to slander, and we have good laws and civil courts to hold them accountable for defamation. So that leaves two legislative concerns. First is this: the civil rights movement, of which SPLC was once a part, had made great progress in uniting our country and marginalizing racist ideology and dramatically reducing racial strife between the 1950s and the 1990s. But over the past several decades, that progress seems to have reversed. In recent years, we've watched our country torn apart by growing racial strife. And the allegation at the heart of this matter is that the SPLC was covertly fanning these flames for their own financial gain. A significant flashpoint, of course, was the Charlottesville riots, which had fatal results. And I do need to call out the ranking member for deliberately perpetuating the Democrats' dishonest claim that Donald Trump praised the Nazis at Charlottesville when he said there were, quote, very fine people on both sides. What the ranking member knows but chose to leave out is that Trump then said, I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists because they should be condemned totally, unquote. Ranking member knows this, and the fact that he perpetuated that.
And the question is, why did he say it in the first place? You should never have said that in the first place, and people would not have gotten that idea. Why would you say that particular phrase in the first place?
Today, it speaks for itself.
Mr. Chairman, I
Now
ask
we
that
have
the
the
gentleman's
I do not
words be
yield.
taken down.
Gentleman will suspend. The gentleman will suspend. What purpose does the gentleman interrupt?
I ask that the gentleman's words be taken down.
Which words? Does
Which
the
words
gentleman
are
object
which
to?
words are you referring to?
Well, he mentioned twice that the ranking member misled, deceived, and lied to this committee.
The gentleman,
I didn't
he has
use the
impugned-
word deceive. I
he
didn't
has
use the word
impugned-
lie.
He has
the
impugned the
gentleman,
motives.
would both gentlemen please suspend? Would the recording clerk read back verbatim that passage is being referred to?
Both times.
There's only one chair here. I'll take just one of them. It'll be fine.
I think we need.
The gentleman
both
will
of them.
suspend.
To put it in context, Mr. Chairman, we got to have both
The
utterings.
gentleman will suspend. We can't hear you. Sorry. Okay, just as loud as you could, please.
I need to call out. Go ahead.
For
Deliberately perpetuating the deliberately perpetuating the Democrats' dishonest claim that Donald Trump praised the neo-Nazis.
Thank you.
Charlottesville.
Thank you. Is that the passage or one of the two times that you're referring to?
That's the first passage.
Excellent. Just one moment then, please. The chairman's prepared to rule. Although we would prefer that all people speak only to the facts and not to the previous statements of either side, it does not violate the rules of decorum to have an opinion as to the veracity of the other person's statement. With that, I thank the gentleman, but
Mr.
I will
Chairman,
not take down the lines.
Mr. Chairman, the second statement is the one that I asked then that the words be taken down. And so it's only proper that we hear the second.
Okay, if the gentleman will suspend, I'll be patient. Could you please read the second one and tell me, is there a difference?
What the ranking member knows but chose to leave out is that Trump then said, I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis or white nationalists because they should be condemned totally.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman will suspend. Having heard both of these and understanding them in context, they meet the requirement of within decorum. Again, the chair would caution individuals whenever possible to refer to the specifics and not to the testimony or the statements of either side. However, in context, it was not a violation for which the words may be taken down. And with that, the gentleman from California may continue.
Mr. Chairman.
It is the gentleman from,
Parliamentary inquirer.
it is the gentleman's time. I will hear your parliamentary question after the conclusion of his
Point of
time.
order, Mr.
Please.
Chair.
The gentleman
Point
will
of order,
continue.
Mr. Chairman. Point of order.
The gentleman will state his point of order.
Is it within the rules?
That is not how you state a point of order. State your point of order.
My point of order is it's incorrect for the chair of the committee to not hear argument on a motion.
Gentlemen, if you're considering it a point of order, in answer to the point of order, in answer to point of order, a motion to have words taken down, the words speak for themselves. The gentleman had them heard. I'm aware of what they were, and I've made my ruling. The gentleman, I thank him for his point of order. We now go to the gentleman from California, and I would ask that it be reset back to 2 minutes, and we'll conclude with 3 minutes or 3 minutes remaining. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm reminded of that old movie line, the gentleman can't handle the truth. Now we have the revelation that the SPLC paid the chief organizer of this Unite the Right riot $270,000 while he was recruiting agitators and posting inflammatory rhetoric. And to learn that this was part of more than $3 million in such payments to such extremist groups begs the question of whether the SPLC was financing the very extremist groups it was assuring donors was fighting with their contributions. The terrible attack on the mosque in San Diego on Monday was inspired by neo-Nazi propaganda. Was this surreptitiously financed by the SPLC or similar NGOs or perhaps even foreign governments? That's a legitimate concern and one that we need to fully explore. The second legislative concern is that during the Biden administration, the Attorney General and the FBI Director told this committee that white supremacist groups were the greatest single threat that our country faced. The SPLC was one of the primary sources of this testimony. Was this an attempt to mislead Congress? And were the officials responsible for this testimony victims of misinformation by the SPLC, or were they active participants in this deception? I think we need to get to the bottom of that as well. Now, Dr. Swain, you detailed the smear campaign against you that obviously caused you reputational damage and financial loss. And Mr. Perkins, your organization suffered both financial loss and actual violence. Why haven't you sued the SPLC?
Partly because information was not available, as is now coming forth. We did talk to some attorneys initially about the violence that was perpetrated, but because of really there were other suits that were brought against the SPLC, but their image was so strong until now that it was very difficult. We had suits that were brought in court that did not succeed. I think it's a different day now, and I think you may see some civil actions.
I would certainly hope so. Mr. O'Neill, is it possible the SPLC is not the only source of funds going to these extremist groups? Is it possible they're financed by other NGOs or even foreign governments? What reforms would you recommend?
It is possible, but I have no knowledge of that. What I know are the allegations claimed in the indictment, but I would highly encourage Congress to consider adding to any rider of financial disbursements that no taxpayer funds be directed to an organization that systematically slanders and defames mainstream conservatives and Christians, or frankly, those on the other side of the aisle in the way that the SPLC does.
Thank you.
May I answer the question about why I haven't sued the Southern Poverty Law Center?
If that's a question, I'll allow you to briefly answer if you would.
Because I didn't have the financial resources. There's no way I could go up against an organization that had the types of resources as the Southern Poverty Law Center.
The gentleman yields back. We now go to the ranking member of the full committee, the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, for his questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just a footnote to that recent contretemps. I was not remotely offended by what the gentleman from California said, because I'm used to having all of my points misstated by him regularly. It was interesting. He said that I had accused the president of praising the Ku Klux Klan and the neo-Nazis. I never said that. I said he just made himself perfectly clear when he said there were very fine people on both sides. The fact that you can find him contradicting himself immediately thereafter and in other subsequent statements is just a reflection of how Donald Trump speaks. Sometimes China is his biggest enemy in the world, and when he was over in China, then he loved President Xi and he adored him and they're great friends and so on. So that's Donald Trump. But I can't imagine any other president in American history finding very fine people on both sides of an anti-Semitic race attack like the one that led to the death of Heather Heyer. So I stand completely by what I said before, and I reject completely your insinuation that I've misrepresented the reality. All I did was quote Donald Trump's own words. Ms. Wiley, and I'll say one other thing. Very fine people on both sides. You know, to people in Charlottesville, that was a very painful thing. My sister and her family happen to live in Charlottesville. The Ku Klux Klan and the neo-Nazis gathered at the local synagogue. That's where they kicked off their attack on Jews and African Americans in Charlottesville. So some people might be able to roll their eyes at that and say, oh, well, later he read a statement that his staff wrote for him saying that he denounces racist violence, but he made himself perfectly clear. Ms. Wiley, have you heard any of these witnesses today cite any evidence that anybody was deceived or defrauded by the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is the whole heart of this attack on them? Did you hear one iota of evidence being offered that anybody was deceived or defrauded?
I have not, and we know as a matter of fact that donors continue to try to send money to the Southern Poverty Law Center and being blocked by
In fact, haven't dozens of them stood up to say, no, they weren't defrauded in any way. That's why they're supporting the Southern Poverty Law Center, because they've been so effective in going undercover to blow the cover on these racist anti-Semitic plots.
Yes, and I just want to note that, and because there was a representation made about the SPLC, that it worked with the Donald Trump Department of Justice providing information from its informant program in the first Trump administration. So that's why we were so concerned to hear that denial that they had knowledge that the acting attorney general had to retract. This is something that should concern all Americans, because no Department of Justice should be behaving this way.
Yeah. Well, you know the not-for-profit sector very well. It seems like now one of the lines of attack against the SPLC is that the people who work there make too much money. I just went online and checked out some of the the salaried executives of the right-wing groups that we're not having a hearing about today, like the NRA. Wayne LaPierre was making $1.2 million when he was there. You could look at the Heritage Foundation, which in 2023 paid its president $953,000, I think 3 times what they're talking about there. I imagine being the CEO of the Southern Poverty Law Center is a lot more dangerous than being the president of the Heritage Foundation. Just very quickly on that, is there anything to this, the idea that the work of the Southern Poverty Law Center should be trashed and derided and dismissed because the people who go to work there in Alabama are being paid too much money?
Well, certainly not. And I think the point is the way in which the Southern Poverty Law Center is providing free legal services, for example, to a Black community that it has developers coming for land and they won't benefit from the land, for food assistance programs, to make sure that a mother who has a disabled child, 5 years old, is getting the disability services the law requires. That is what is happening with donations as well. And we are not talking enough about the work that civil rights organizations do, including SPLC. That
Well, let's talk about that, because to listen to some of your co-panelists there, you'd think that there is no extremist hate violence taking place. What about the AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, where Dylan Roof, who was charged up on white supremacy, went out and killed 9 people? How about the Tree of Life Synagogue, the worst anti-Semitic attack in American history, where Robert Bowers, who was consumed with white genocide replacement theory, which we hear from even more mainstream conservative groups, killed 11 people. Is racist violence, in fact, some kind of myth made up by the Southern Poverty Law Center?
No, and the government's own data demonstrates that. But also, if you look at
The gentlelady can answer the question, but not go on beyond that. The gentleman's time has expired.
thank you.
Thank you. We now go to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you holding this hearing. The information that has come out in this indictment is truly disturbing. My district is adjacent to the district that includes Charlottesville. Many of my constituents have family in Charlottesville. Many of my constituents work in Charlottesville. And to see that, let me ask you, Mr. O'Neill, the SPLC explicitly stated that they sought donations under the auspices that donor money would be used to help dismantle violent extremist groups by funding F37, who was a member of the online leadership chat group that planned the 2017 Unite the Right event in Charlottesville and attended the event at the direction of the SPLC. Is that helping to dismantle these organizations?
No. I would say the SPLC in subsequent filings did mention 2 cases where they claim information from these informants, these field sources, led to federal prosecutions. So I think that is important context to add.
Thank you. I want to continue to inquire about this funding. Given the SPLC's track record of partisanship and its direct link to real-world violence, why did the FBI and DOJ during the Biden and Harris administration maintain a close relationship with the SPLC?
Yeah, my understanding is that the SPLC's bias and targeting of mainstream conservative and Christian groups aligned very strongly with the Biden DOJ and the Biden White House's preferences. And that's why in my second book, The Woktopus, I go through all of the ways in which the Biden administration solicited information on the domestic terror threat from the Southern Poverty Law Center, how we have this alignment with demonizing concerned moms and dads that happened consistently. And of course, when the SPLC released the hate map that included chapters of Moms for Liberty for the very first time, putting moms and dads who are concerned about their kids' education on a map with the Klan, they first gave an embargoed copy to their allies at the Civil Rights Division in the DOJ.
So the SPLC got special treatment, direct access to high-ranking officials in the Civil Rights Division, early access to FBI hate crime data, and invitations to exclusive events with DOJ leadership during the Biden and Harris administration.
Correct. In fact, they had one of their staffers by the name of R.G. Cravens who spoke before DOJ prosecutors. This is the same man who, when the Southern Poverty Law Center put Focus on the Family on the hate map last year, he defended putting Focus on the Family on the hate map by saying that it is both false and dangerous for conservative Christians to hold to biblical morality against the claims of the LGBTQ movement.
And in October of this year, FBI Director Patel terminated the FBI's relationship with the SPLC. What was the nature of the relationship prior to the termination? You discussed that. Isn't it true that the FBI relied on the SPLC's hate group designation when determining which extremist groups to monitor?
Yes, specifically in the notorious memo from the FBI's Richmond office, which was coordinated with other FBI offices. They cited the SPLC's list of radical traditional Catholic hate groups. Interestingly, that's where my anecdote about a convent comes from. And one of those organizations on that list no longer existed and didn't exist at the time.
Can you talk a little bit more about that FBI memo related to the Catholics in Richmond?
Yes. So this memo was released by whistleblowers. It was not meant to be publicly disseminated. And only after a whistleblower released the memo did the FBI, the national office, publicly come out and say that it didn't meet the FBI's standards. I'd say that's an understatement. It just took the SPLC's list of radical traditional Catholic hate groups verbatim and put it into the FBI's language in the memo. For background, this is a list of radical traditional Catholic groups that is extremely outdated, according to my sources, and that was developed by Heidi Beirich, who now is leading the Global Project Against Hate and Extremism. She's no longer even at the SPLC.
It's truly shocking. Thank you for being here. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know there's a talk of the Department of Justice's vindictive prosecutions of SPLC. I just want to remind us all of something else that the Trump DOJ just did. On April 14th this year, exactly a week before it targeted SPLC, DOJ asked the federal court to vacate the convictions of dozens of leaders of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. Now, who are the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers? Both are far-right organizations that spout Islamophobic, misogynistic, and white nationalist ideologies, and both happen to be on SPLC's watch list. Both groups and others like them took up arms for Donald Trump and attacked the Capitol on January 6th. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to put into the record two articles about the January 6th rioters and their later crimes. People forget what happened in the weeks before January 6th. In December of 2020, at yet another pro-Trump rally, they rioted in the streets of DC, vandalized historically Black churches, white nationalists supporting Donald Trump, vandalizing African-American places of worship right here in the Capitol. For their crimes leading up to and on January 6th, these individuals, including Enrique Tarrio, Stuart Rhodes, and many others, were convicted of seditious conspiracy and other felonies and sentenced to more than 100 years in prison collectively. Now, Donald Trump unleashed over 1,500 criminals on our streets, some of who have gone on to commit kidnapping, sexual assault, burglary, death threats against elected officials. And now the department is trying to erase their guilt permanently and ensure they cannot be recharged. SPLC has been tracking these groups for years, long before January 6th, and designated them and others like them as hate groups. SPLC has continued to call out these groups for the danger they pose to our communities and our democracy. The label has upset these groups so much that Gavin McInnes, the founder of Proud Boys, who describes himself as a Western chauvinist and said Muslims are stupid, sued the SPLC in 2019 for defamation for designating them as a hate group, and that lawsuit failed. Ms. Wiley, you've described the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers as the foot soldiers of January 6th. In your opinion, is documenting and naming these groups part of the reason why SPLC is now being punished by the Trump administration?
Sadly, because of the pattern of behavior and weaponization that we have seen, it's hard not to conclude that, and particularly because of exactly the point you just raised, Representative Lofgren, that we're seeing pardoning of violence and violent insurrection from January 6th.
Now, what does it say about this administration that is prosecuting the group that helped end the Klan, but apparently intending to give taxpayer money to violent white nationalists who vandalized Black churches in the Capitol alike through this so-called settlement fund on a lawsuit that was bogus and barred by the statute of limitations? That's what this administration is. Donald Trump rewarding his foot soldiers for assaulting and beating up law enforcement in his name to the tunes of billions of dollars, and punishing their common enemy, the organization that monitors and calls out their crime. I'd like to note that this isn't.
Well, that $1.7 billion lawsuit against the IRS, Donald Trump wanted them to settle with, because he was suing us. Donald Trump was suing us for $10 billion. He said, I'll settle for $1.7 billion that you can pay my January 6 people from. And now the police organization, or the National Organization of Police and Sheriffs and all that, have filed a lawsuit, or they're about to file a lawsuit against against giving that $1.7 billion to the people from January 6th, because they attacked the police officers on January 6th. They're about to have a lawsuit. The policemen ain't trying to hear you giving these January 6 people no money.
About just coddling the criminals who tried to overthrow the government and who attacked police officers viciously, and I would add, were convicted in courts of law by juries of their peers, as the Constitution provides, but also an effort perhaps to make sure that when a call goes out to violent extremists to overturn the government, to attack violently the government again, that those extremists will know a couple of things. One, that the president will pardon them for their crimes. And two, that the president will reward them monetarily with taxpayer dollars for their violence and for their treason. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Before recognizing the gentleman from North Carolina, I do have to step out for a minute. I want to just tell our witnesses that we'll be back shortly, and I do think we have votes at 12 or 12:30, so there may be a little break. And I should have mentioned at the outset, if any of you need a break at any time, you know, you've been there almost 2 hours. I've stepped out a few times. So if you need a break, just please let us know. Real quick, you see?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a series of letters from Moms for Liberty.
Quickly, yes.
Oh, Tina Deskovich, Julie Mock, and then a whole series of additional letters from Moms for Liberty. Then I also have.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Southern Poverty Law Center, education materials surprisingly common in red states.
Without objection.
Arizona School Resource directed teachers to condemn Moms for Liberty, Turning Point USA in their class.
Without objection.
SPLC curriculum in K-12 Learning for Justice.
Without objection.
SPLC curriculum in Arizona document.
Okay.
Additionally, federal grand jury charges Southern Poverty Law Center for wire fraud, false statements, and conspiracy to commit money laundering.
Without objection.
Southern Poverty Law Center is a scam, not an arbiter of justice.
Without objection.
SPLC is a hedge fund with a dumb anti-racism newsletter.
Without objection.
Exposing the SPLC and celebrating their future demise.
Without objection.
Biden DOJ was in cahoots with SPLC as it funded extremist groups.
Without objection.
SPLC's wealth raises questions despite controversial activities.
Without objection.
990 filed in October of 2024 by SPLC.
Objection.
And America First Legal reveals explosive documents exposing Biden Department of Justice's partnership and coordinated campaign with the Southern Poverty Law Center to weaponize civil rights enforcement.
Objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Harris is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to submit into the record a letter from Awake, Illinois to the House Judiciary
Without
Committee.
objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm so grateful for all you witnesses for being here today, and I want to take just a few moments to talk about the shooting that took place at Family Research Council's headquarters in 2012. That obviously hits home for me because I have followed and admired the great work of FRC as both a pastor involved for a number of years and now as a member of Congress. In 2010, the SPLC, as we've talked about today, designated Family Research Council as an anti-LGBTQ hate group and placed it on its so-called hate map. And as I stated in our hearing last regarding the SPLC, there's nothing hateful about the Family Research Council. Family Research Council is a pro-family, pro-life group that promotes the Christian values held by many, many Americans. But that didn't stop the SPLC from placing FRC on this map. What was clearly a politically motivated designation was intended to harm FRC, and it had dire consequences. We've mentioned it today. On August 15, 2012, Floyd Lee Corkins II entered Family Research Council's headquarters in Washington, D.C. and opened fire. It was FRC security guard Leo Johnson who heroically tackled Corkins to the ground and wrestled the gun out of his hand despite being shot in the arm. And thankfully, no one was killed, and Corkins was sent to prison for a period of time. However, I want to bring attention today to what Corkins told the police, which we happen to have on video right here. And I would call your attention to Corkins' video.
Now, how did you, this building, this organization, how did you find it early? Did you like look it up online, or how did you know about it?
Southern Poverty Law lists anti-gay groups. I found them online.
Okay.
A little bit of research on their website, stuff like that.
Okay.
I did a little bit of research, and guess where he landed? There's no speculation here, you know? There's no need for interpretation at this. The convicted shooter specifically cited SPLC as his source for finding out about Family Research Council. Speaks for itself. Mr. Perkins, what was your immediate reaction when you found out that the shooter learned about FRC through this SPLC hate map?
Congressman Harris, I actually anticipated that was the case. In fact, the day after, before the FBI acknowledged it, I stood before dozens of TV cameras on the street in front of FRC and said that FRC may not have pulled the trigger, but they inspired the gunman. I was mocked by the media, but then the testimony, the confession came out. And I asked at that point for SPLC take down Christian groups from this list. They didn't, and the consequences have been in 2017. One of your colleagues, one of my former colleagues, Steve Scalise, was shot. He was targeted by the SPLC. And then, of course, last year, Charlie Kirk, who also was targeted by SPLC, was assassinated. So there is culpability in knowing that this list, this ideological labeling leads to violence.
No doubt. And as of yesterday, when I looked up FRC on SPLC's hate map, your organization is still listed despite this attack in 2012. So what impact has this continued designation on has it had on the organization and your staff?
Well, fortunately, we were large enough that we could sustain SPLC and their blood money that they've been raising to target conservative groups. It has hurt us. We spent $6 million just to enhance our security. We've had, it's funny, they're crying now that they're getting their own medicine, that Fidelity is not giving money to them. How about the thousands of conservative groups that were denied donor-driven funds because SPLC's labeling? Is there fairness in that? I think not.
And I will say, this may seem like a silly question, but following the 2012 attack on your headquarters, did SPLC ever reach out to apologize?
No.
Well, I think it's disgraceful that FRC has put such a hate map to begin with in place. SPLC does not need to agree with everything that FRC says, does, or stands for. However, their actions of placing this organization on a hate map is clearly an attempt to cripple and socially ostracize a conservative organization, and it cannot be allowed again and again. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. We now go to the gentlelady from Pennsylvania. I see next. Okay. Then the gentlelady from Washington. I'm looking and seeing you came back. So we're thrilled to have you with us. The gentlelady is
Wonderful.
recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. It is really a rich irony that Republicans want to argue that Donald Trump or this DOJ care about stopping hate. And that's why they're going after the Southern Poverty Law Center. Donald Trump just set up an illegal $1.8 billion slush fund of U.S. taxpayer dollars to pardon convicted insurrectionists who are tied to white supremacists from the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, Nazi supremacists. Oh yes, and prohibit any action against his own violations or his family's violations of tax law. You want to argue that Trump's DOJ is trying to stop hate? Give me a break. Trump ran his campaigns and these administrations on stoking fear and racism against communities of color and promoting hate, enacted Muslim bans, kidnapped and disappeared immigrants of all immigration statuses, including US citizens, forced universities to roll back their diversity, equity, inclusion efforts, stripped voting rights from Black and brown voters, disenfranchising women and rural voters with the SAVE Act that he wants to pass. It's all a shameless plan to return America to single party control by a Republican Party who, unable to win on any sort of policy merits, turns to an old racist playbook that restricts the power of Black, brown, and working class voters and goes after any political foes just to hold on to power. That's what's happening. For decades, the Southern Poverty Law Center has sued and won jury verdicts against hate groups who conspire and facilitate violence against Black and brown people. The center secured a verdict against the planners of the 2017 Charlottesville rally, the same rally that drew participants whom Donald Trump called very fine people on both sides. And yes, I know what he said after that to try and defend it, but the entire rally was organized by white nationalists. And even after images and videos revealed that these participants put up their arms in Nazi salutes and violently injured counter-protesters and cheered on the former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, he stuck by that. SPLC has been winning. That's why Donald Trump wants to target them. That's the problem. Stephen Miller, angry that SPLC called him out back in 2016 for promoting white nationalism and right-wing extremist ideas, has decided to take revenge with an outrageous indictment that is replete with mistakes of fact and law. It is a complete fabrication that any crime has been committed at all. In the words of one former prosecutor, DOJ falls, quote, egregiously short on alleging a crime. So, Ms. Wiley, the indictment and this entire hearing is premised on the theory that SPLC somehow manufactured hate by paying confidential informants. So I want to set the record straight about these informants. Based on what we know from public reporting, did one of the center's informants produce information that successfully prevented a white supremacist group's planned terrorist attacks against a synagogue and gay bar in Las Vegas?
Yes, Atawaffen Division is the name of the extremist group. And I should say that in addition to the work that SPLC did that prevented the violence, in fact, it was in 2019, so it was information it turned on to the Department of Justice during the Trump administration. So the suggestion that somehow SPLC only works with an administration based on the party is undermined by this very important fact. And what the FBI found was that this person had already bought the supplies for the attack on a synagogue and a bar where a lot of LGBTQ people frequented.
Thank you. I'm going to go through a series of these, so just a yes or no would be great. Did another informant produce information that led to the arrest of a neo-Nazi individual who sought a national security clearance in Philadelphia Navy Yard?
Yes.
Did an informant produce information that the center used to tip off the FBI about the 2017 Charlottesville rally?
Yes.
So the center was using informants to root out hate and help the FBI prosecute that hate, not manufacture hate. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I want to ask you, the charges are also premised on the idea that donors were misled and they didn't know what the funds were being used for. But the New York Times publicly reported there's no donor that's come forward, as Mr. Raskin said. Based on your experience, is there anything different about how SPLC is operating than any other nonprofit?
Not that I'm aware of.
Thank you, Ms. Wiley. This seems to be a trumped-up case, literally, just to continue to prosecute people who don't agree. I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back.
Mr.
We
Chairman,
now go to,
Is this from UC request?
of course.
Thank you very much. The first one is The Intercept. We knew they were paying informants. SPLC donors reject Trump DOJ.
Without objection.
The second one is a letter from the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights Nonprofits Together in
Without objection.
442 civil rights organizations rejecting the criminal charges. And finally, unanimous consent to introduce a statement from Trevor Potter, president of Campaign Legal Center, former Republican chair of the FEC.
Without objection, so ordered. We now go to Mr. Hunt for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The talking point for the Democrat high brain today is that Jim Crow is alive and well in America, and I am sure that some of the SPLC's actions have helped them make this argument. My first question is for you, Ms. Swain. In the 2024 presidential election, were you required to pay a poll tax before you voted?
No.
I have another question for you. When you went to vote at the voting locations, were you intimidated in any way with baseball bats, fire hoses, or dogs?
The only thing that intimidated me is that in my state that you go in, if you have to ask for a Republican ballot or a Democrat ballot, and if you are in a precinct that's predominantly Democrat, I think you would have a lot of fear.
Thank you for answering that question, ma'am. For all my Democrat colleagues and everyone on the left screaming Jim Crow 2.0, like I hear ad infinitum, let's take a moment to revisit what actual Jim Crow was. Jim Crow was a time when Black Americans could not sit in classrooms with white Americans. It was colored-only water fountains. It was beatings in the streets. It was lynchings. It was fear. It was public humiliation. My own father, who grew up in a segregated South in New Orleans, had to walk around to the back of a restaurant just to order a sandwich in the French quarters of New Orleans because of the color of his skin. That was Jim Crow. And that is precisely why it is so offensive to compare that era of legalized discrimination and racial terror to showing a photo ID in a voting booth. And it's just as offensive when groups and organizations like these manufacture faux hate and racial tension. Requiring identification to vote is not oppression. It is not segregation. It is not racism. It is a basic standard that applies equally to every single American citizen, regardless of what you look like. You need an ID to board a plane. You need an ID to cash a check. You need an ID to buy alcohol. You need an ID to enter these very federal buildings. And by the way, attaining an ID in this country is an extremely low bar. But somehow showing an ID to vote in America is now considered to be Jim Crow 2.0. This is not about civil rights. This is about political theater. And the Democrat Party survives on manufacturing grievance. Democrats invoke the pain of the past because they have nothing to offer for the present. They don't want an honest debate. They want emotional manipulation. They want outrage. They want division, as evidenced by our discussion in this very hearing today. They want Americans to fight each other because chaos is politically useful to them. Words like racism and white supremacy and Jim Crow 2.0. For the purposes of elucidating my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, let's take a hard look at what real Jim Crow was. Check out this one behind me. You see, this is Jim Crow. This is what Democrats call Jim Crow. Next slide, please. See, that is Jim Crow. For whatever reason, this is what Democrats call Jim Crow. Slide, please. That is Jim Crow. This is what Democrats call Jim Crow. I know that some of these images can seem to be very jarring to many of us that haven't experienced that over the course of the past 40 years of my lifetime. I never saw these things. I never experienced them personally, but I have family members who have and who did. And that's why it is extraordinarily important for us to be very, very careful with what we compare to Jim Crow, because this country has come a very, very long way. I keep saying this over and over and over and over again till I am blue in the face. I represent a white majority district along with 3 of my other Black colleagues here in Congress. And you know what? Nobody cares about what we look like. We are being judged not by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character, because we've come a long way from this. I don't want to go back to that. In fact, I want to continue on the path that America has set forward in the name of Jesus Christ. And I want to let people know that we don't need to be angry. We don't need to be divided. We want equality for everyone. Let me be crystal clear. This is not 1960 anymore. It's 2026. And the fact that groups like these are willing to stroke the flames of hate by funding the KKK is absurd. With that, I yield back the remainder of my time. Thank you for being here.
Thank the gentleman. He yields back. We now go to the gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we heard earlier, in July 1983, the Ku Klux Klan firebombed the Southern Poverty Law Center's offices in Montgomery, Alabama. The Klan carried out its violent attack because the SPLC had stood up against it and has continued to stand up against hate in the following decades, whether it's racial and religious hate, hatred of immigrants, or the LGBTQ community. This melted clock, which was frozen in time by the KKK firebombing, still hangs in SPLC's headquarters as a reminder of the very real dangers of defending American civil liberties from hate. So how grotesque is it, given that history, that the majority has chosen to frame this hearing as an accusation that the Southern Poverty Law Center itself is in the business of manufacturing hate? But with the increasing shamelessness of the Trump administration and its congressional allies, none of us should be surprised that they are desperately trying to manufacture a reason to attack one of the organizations standing up to their assault on American civil rights. They're trying to turn back the clock and drag America backwards into some of the darkest days of our past. What has changed is not the Southern Poverty Law Center, but the way that this administration, with its embrace of white nationalist rhetoric and groups, has decided to rewrite facts and history. In the past year, we've seen pardons of Proud Boys and Oath Keepers who orchestrated the violent January 6th attack. The DOJ hiding from the public government research confirming that right-wing extremism poses the biggest domestic terrorism threat to our nation. The White House issuing NSPM 7, a directive that the Department of Justice and IRS target left-leaning groups that the White House has declared without evidence are a threat to our national security, and members of the administration making repeated statements that they intend to destroy nonprofit groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center that are a threat to their extremist agenda. This White House has engaged in a concerted attack on the pillars of civil society that would ordinarily hold it accountable, going after law firms, the courts, legacy media, universities, organized religion, and even the Pope. We can all see a corrupt DOJ leveraging its power to attack the president's perceived enemies and protect his allies, prosecuting those who've tried to hold the administration accountable, stealing taxpayer dollars to create a $1.8 billion slush fund to make payoffs to Trump loyalists who've been convicted of serious crimes, and giving Trump and his family a gold-plated get-out-of-jail-free card with the settlement agreement that the president's lawyer just signed. The Department of Justice's blatantly political prosecution and this committee's attacks against the Southern Poverty Law Center signaled the revival of an old authoritarian playbook to vilify and discredit those working to combat hate and protect people from oppression. And it's part of this administration's whole of government attempt to shut down opposition to its lawless behavior. This administration and its MAGA allies are trying to rewrite facts and history just as they've tried to whitewash the violent January 6th assault on our Capitol and our Constitution. But facts have a way of being sticky. They get in the way of lies. Americans have always sought to bend the arc of history towards justice, to hold those in power accountable, and to spur our country towards a more inclusive and perfect union. And we're not going to stop now. We are not going to allow extremists and charlatans to turn back the clock and take our civil rights and repression and put them asunder with hate. So, Ms. Wiley, the DOJ's indictment targets SPLC itself rather than individuals. Is the administration's goal to take out the organization, and why?
Well, I certainly can't speak for the administration. I think that what is so concerning to us as a civil rights community is that the Southern Poverty Law Center has been attacked because it does work to ensure that Black voters can vote, because it does work to show and ensure that fair maps are drawn for places like Alabama and Louisiana, where yes, because we still
Don't push the garbage nonsense. They wasn't FBI spies.
have racial segregation in this country, Black people have to be packed or cracked to take away the opportunity for them to decide who can represent them that will actually be accountable to them. These are incredibly important for civil rights, but it's also incredibly important for people's ability to have voice and power, including to dissent and disagree with the policies of this administration.
Do you think that
The gentlelady's
SPLC
time
might
has
have been
expired.
targeted because it published emails by Stephen Miller that were expressing white nationalist sentiments?
The gentlelady may answer briefly.
Possibly, yes.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize myself. Ms. Wiley, would you agree with the statement that Charlie Kirk was a dangerous extremist?
I can't answer the question that way. I can certainly say that
No.
statements that I am aware of that Mr. Kirk made were ones that I would consider to be dangerous.
And would those be the ones that he took directly from the Bible repeatedly?
I'm referring to the ones that he made about Black women and Black communities, the stereotyping that stereotyped whole group of people.
So you would put him on a list of dangerous people that should, as the Southern Poverty
I
Center did.
don't designate groups. I'm just.
Well, you've had
answering your
opinions on
question.
everything the Democrats asked for. I just thought you might have an opinion on that.
I shared my opinion about some of the things I heard he said, yes.
Okay. Would you agree that a group could be good, have a great mission, do a lot of good things, but also commit crimes?
Well, I mean, anything is possible. I think
Well,
what we're
no,
talking about
it's-
today is a
that was kind of a
specific
yes or no, but,
organization. It's a specific organization we're talking about, though, which is Southern Poverty Law Center. And I
So
think the point is-
your opinion is they can't commit crimes because they do good?
My opinion is that we see a prosecution where we know that the Southern Poverty Law Center offered evidence and is asking for accountability about whether that exculpatory evidence was shown to a grand jury. That should concern all Americans.
Okay, Mr. O'Neill, I'll ask you essentially the same question. Would you say that Southern Poverty Law Center does some good work, at least historically?
Yes.
And having looked at the evidence, would you say that it appears to be overwhelmingly evidence of criminal activity?
I would direct audiences to page 10 of the indictment, where there's a direct quote from an employee saying, "I certify that I am the sole owner of the above named proprietorship." This is a statement to a bank in December of 20.
You're talking about FBI informants. Stop saying the FBI was in the crowd on January 6th. It wasn't FBI, it was informants, which means those are regular, ordinary human beings that the government uses or police force or police process used to help them solve crimes. It wasn't the FBI in the crowd. FBI informants are regular, everyday people. Stop spreading the lies.
2016, and then the statement from then Chief Executive Officer of the SPLC, Margaret Wong, who said that the accounts below listed were open for the benefit of the Southern Poverty Law Center operations and operated under the center's authority.
Okay, so what you have is actual evidence of bank fraud.
I'd say it's black and white.
Okay.
So long
So-
as the quotes from the indictment are accurate, I have not seen.
Well,
the
people will
underlying-
go to jail if those, if it turns out that, that in fact it was true, but they've indicted them. So, both sides are playing high risk, but it appears as though the evidence is overwhelming. Ms. Wiley, did you ever hear of the Jewish Defense League? Are you familiar with them?
I'm not familiar with them.
Okay. Anyone else familiar with them? You are. Mr. O'Neill, you're familiar with them. They go back to the days of New York City and going after basically white supremacist groups, anti-Semitic groups.
Yes.
Would it surprise you to know that Irv Rubin and Earl Kruger both went to prison for attempting to blow up my office in 2001?
I was not aware of this, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Earl Kruger later died in prison. Irv died before being tried, but the other was convicted and eventually actually confessed. So
Very sorry to hear that.
here's a group you know of. They have a history of fighting anti-Semitism, something that's been mentioned on the other side, and that obviously still exists in this country, as does racism. So you can be a good group, and yet you could have criminal activity, an activity that flies in the face of what you say you stand for.
Yes.
Ms. Wiley, I asked you that question for a reason. Dr. Swan here has, in fact, a history of being falsely accused, a history of being gone after. Mr. Perkins has given these examples. The other side has spent a lot of time here today trying to tell us that it's all motivated because somehow we're persecuting people in this administration. Do you have any evidence, not anecdotally that, oh, they picked them? Do you have any evidence that, in fact, Southern Poverty did not, in fact, commit these crimes? Do you have any firsthand evidence of that? Yes or no, please?
Well, the Southern Poverty Law Center has a motion before the court right now, which actually says that the Department of Justice admitted that they knew that the banks knew Southern Poverty Law Center owned the accounts. That is evidence in the public
Okay.
record that will be tried in court.
I will look forward to that in trial. And I want to thank all the witnesses today for bringing out the fact that we should, in fact, this committee should be looking at these not-for-profits and whether, in fact, they have deviated from their mission. And with that, we have, oh, you have another?
Just a
hand?
couple you see, yeah, this
Gentleman's
is-
recognized.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. The Guardian, U.S. lawmakers say DOJ rushed Southern Poverty Law Center indictment citing whistleblowers.
Without objection.
House Judiciary Democrats letter read the targeting of Southern Poverty Law Center to Deputy Attorney General Akash Singh.
Without objection.
And that's it for now.
Thank you. We now go to gentlelady from Georgia for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for our witnesses being here today. My father was the president of the Illinois chapter of the NAACP for many, many years. As a child, I learned how to fight for my rights before I even learned how to walk. I marched in protests, sat in meetings, and helped to organize. I want everyone in this room to understand what is happening right now. The Republican Party has launched an all-out assault against civil rights organizations founded to ensure the end of Jim Crow. But that's just one part of this strategy. 3 weeks ago, the Supreme Court gutted Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act in Louisiana versus Calais, saying that, and I'm going to quote, race-neutral considerations, that it could employ race-neutral considerations, end quote, in redistricting. And within days, Southern legislatures, they rushed to wipe out Black representation in Congress. Tennessee called an emergency session to repeal its own law against mid-decade redistricting. It then splintered Memphis, a city that is 60% Black, into 3 districts to dilute the voices of the Black voters there. The state's Black legislators protested, and in response, the speaker stripped every single one of them of their committee assignments. Tennessee is not alone in silencing Black voices. Alabama moved to reinstate maps a court previously struck down for intentional racial discrimination. Florida passed new racially gerrymandered maps, and we're waiting in my home state of Georgia to see what happens with us on June 17th. Ms. Wiley, and you can just answer yes or no, have you ever seen 5 states move simultaneously to dismantle Black representation in Congress in such a very rapid, short time?
No.
And while this administration demands attacks on Black Americans' voices with phone calls to governors, it is fighting hard for the right-wing extremist groups who stormed the Capitol on January 6th. Groups whose members are not all white supremacists, but doesn't seem to mind white supremacists. Trump's DOJ has given $1.8 billion of a slush fund taken from taxpayers to pay off the 1,600 right-wing rioters who tried to steal the election for him. That's $1 million for each rioter, with $100 million left over. Ms. Wiley, what message does this send to the country that this administration is prosecuting the organization that takes down white supremacists while stealing taxpayer money to give to white supremacists?
I wish I had a word, and I don't have a word for that, except to say that the American public should be outraged.
Southern states are tripping over themselves to eliminate Black representation in Congress. The president is doling out reparations to white supremacists, and DOJ has indicted the Southern Poverty Law Center, an organization built to defend the rights of Americans, on charges so flimsy that it would make Bull Connor and George Wallace blush. Americans deserve a voice in our democracy, representation of their interests, and should not have to fight for their basic civil rights again and again and again. Race should not be a factor. This is an attempt to roll back the progress made through the civil rights movement and strip Black Americans of their voice in public life, using the same tactics as Southern segregationist states following the death of Reconstruction for the very same goal. I am a child of the civil rights movement. We have seen this before. If we needed a reminder or a wake-up call that Jim Crow is alive and evolved, these legislatures made sure that we got the notice. Ms. Wiley, would you like to expand on any previous questions or statements that you weren't able to complete?
I just want to remind us that the federal agencies, FBI, DEA, AFT, spent over $548 million on informants for a reason, because they thought it was going to help them keep people safe. We're talking about this attack on SPLC at a time when we are facing an administration that cut funds to prevent gun violence, that cut funds to track where and how we might have violent white supremacist neo-Nazi attacks, that cut funds that was going to support public safety, all at a time when we've seen a White House directing Department of Justice about who it wants to prosecute. And as someone who used to work for the Department of Justice, that is unheard of.
Thank you, and I yield.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Yeah, just a couple of comments lead off. First of all, I'd like to thank Congressman Hunt for his pictures up here, showing what it was like in the days in which the Democrat Party just rode roughshod over the South. I'd like to point out that the criticisms of Stephen Miller, to this day, are because the role he took in exposing the Duke lacrosse player hoax, in which 3 people almost were sent to prison for life. And Steve had the braveness to stand up to the politically correct. And eventually those 3 people were found innocent after going through absolute hell. I also want to point out a book by Christopher Rufo called America's Culture Revolution, How the Radical Left Conquered Everything. And in that book, he clearly describes how a goal of the hardcore left, and I think some members of this committee are members of the hardcore left, the degree to which they try to racialize everything, not just racialize Black Americans, but Hispanic, Asian Americans, everything, that their ultimate goal is the end of the United States as we have it break down. And it should be mandatory reading. And I think when you talk about Joe Biden screaming about white supremacy all the time, I think a lot of us must wonder, what in the world is he talking about? But what he's talking about is he's trying to divide America on racial lines, which is really just a horrible thing. And finally, I don't have time to look into it. I know if you Google Ann Coulter and Proud Boys, and Ann Coulter is a many times New York Times bestseller, you may get a different version of the narrative we'd had today on the Proud Boys. Okay, now we're going to start off with Mr. O'Neill. Given the SPLC's long documented pattern of partisan activism, financial misconduct, and by the way, the financial misconduct by itself is enough that nobody should ever be citing them for anything, and its recent federal indictment for secretly funneling millions of dollars to individuals tied to extremist groups, how do you explain the continued willingness of major press outlets to cite the SPLC as an authoritative source? And by the way, I think 12 years ago, 13 years ago, any reasonably well educated American would have known the SPLC was just a disgusting made-up group. And I would think that any newspaper, magazine, online magazine that cites them should be considered totally discredited, anybody who's done it the last 12 years. But how do you, Mr. O'Neill, explain why so-called major press outlets, at one time prestigious outlets, still cite SPLC as an authoritative source?
I think it's because the SPLC positions itself as a weapon of the left by demonizing the sorts of conservatives that many in the mainstream left want to render irrelevant, and therefore it is a weapon, a reputational weapon against people who are inconvenient for the left's narrative.
Yep. Go ahead, Mr. Perkins.
Well, they leverage their relationship with government to be able to do that with the media. And then they leverage the relationship with the government with the corporations. And that's how they were able to get the corporations to debank and de-platform conservatives, because of that relationship. I go back to the illustration of the hub. They're at the center of it, but they're not alone.
Right. Yes.
I would also say that they leverage their relationship with universities, especially law schools, because a lot of their the law students will go and intern with the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Okay. Very good. It just still bugs me that they go after Stephen Miller for finding those 3 lacrosse guys innocent. Doesn't it just bug you? And you know that's what it's all about. We'll go to Tony Perkins. Your organization's falsely been labeled a hate group. I mean, to me, you're about the most wholesome organization in the country by SPLC for holding mainstream pro-life, pro-family positions. Man, they hate those pro-lifers. Given that this designation was cited by the perpetrator of the 2012 attack, how do you assess the responsibility of these sort of organizations?
Well, again, we warned them to take down that label, and we've had subsequent attacks on people who have been labeled by them, including the latest Charlie Kirk, who was assassinated. There is culpability here. And I think that we need to look at going back to that government leverage that they've been using. They should never have a relationship with a government entity again.
Right. They just hate Christianity, don't they? Just hate it. Dr. Swain, do you want to comment on that? Would you like to comment?
Time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Carolina, North Carolina.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Just reminding people that many of the roots of anti-racism and civil rights in the South came from the churches, very Christian people. I suppose I need to remind some members of this committee of the long and blood-soaked history of the Ku Klux Klan in North Carolina, maybe even some of our witnesses.
A lot of this hatred and a lot of this antagonism and a lot of this rhetoric against gays, trans, and people of color stems from the church, stems from this Christian nationalist rhetoric. If you listen to them today, it's hateful language. This is why they border on being a hateful group or a hateful organization. No one would tell you that you're hateful if you didn't spew hateful things. Stop spewing hateful things against other Americans and you wouldn't be considered a hate group.
During Reconstruction, the Klan lynched and assassinated countless Black and white leaders who opposed them. In the 60s, the Klan grew to more than 10,000 members in North Carolina, more than any other Southern state combined, and they earned the nickname, and North Carolina earned the nickname Klansville, USA. Klan members in North Carolina carried out coordinated terror campaigns culminating in the 1979 Greensboro Massacre, where the Klan and their neo-Nazi allies shot and killed 5 people who were protesting against them. But the story doesn't end there. Only because of the bravery of those who fought back against the Klan, like so many of our Christian ministers and the Southern Poverty Law Center, did we see some change. In the 1980s, the Southern Poverty Law Center launched Klan Watch to monitor, track, and expose the activities of the Klan. In 1987, the Southern Poverty Law Center won a groundbreaking lawsuit, securing $7 million in a judgment against the United Klans of America after their members lynched 19-year-old student Michael Donald in Mobile 6 years earlier, and I know that Mr. Johnson talked about that. Mercifully, the judgment bankrupted the United Klan of America. This verdict greatly weakened the Klan and sent them scurrying underground, though of course we're seeing many of them today. But it didn't stamp out the last rotten remnants of the Klan throughout the South. And those remnants have been planting seeds that have been cultivated by this president. That's why the continued work of the Southern Poverty Law Center and its allies is so essential. Now, Ms. Wiley, is paying for informants to disrupt a violent white supremacist organization like the Klan the same thing as supporting these groups?
No, and that's why I was citing the FBI's own use of informants.
And actually, was there a book written about an undercover agent by an undercover agent who infiltrated the Klan, like maybe called Black Klansman? Could you tell us about that?
I haven't read the book, but it's a great movie.
It's a great movie. So given that the SPLC's incredibly successful history of fighting the Klan and other extremist groups, do you think that the people who have been consistently donating to the SPLC were surprised that the SPLC was paying informants to monitor, report, and expose the violent activities?
Well, the only things we've heard in the public sphere is donors saying that the SPLC did what they had hoped donors would do, and we know from the public record that they're continuing to try to give money to the SPLC to continue its work.
I kind of hope this lawsuit, this specious lawsuit, results in more contributions to the SPLC. Might be a silver lining to the lawsuit and this ridiculous hearing. Even the amateur hour Trump lackeys at DOJ know that this is a specious lawsuit. They don't believe these cynical charges. They know it's wrong. The SPLC is not funding the KKK or far-right groups. The SPLC is taking them down. But at the same time, the President of the United States is trying to use taxpayer money to fund people who have assaulted police officers and tried to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power. We have to speak truth. We have got to tell the American people what is going on. And that might be the only good thing that comes out of this ridiculous hearing. Thank you, and I yield back.
I'm not sure Leo thinks the hearing's ridiculous, but actually, I'm pretty sure he thinks it doesn't. Gentlelady from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I have unanimous consent request. I request unanimous consent to enter into the record an article from April 15, 2026, titled Justice Department Moves to Toss Seditious Conspiracy Convictions of Oath Keepers and Proud Boys.
Objection.
And the second one I have is several Tennessee House Democrats stripped from committees after last week's special session.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to take the gentlelady from North Carolina's advice and get to what I believe is the truth here. And I'm getting a little historic on you. Anybody ever hear of Machiavelli? Remember that when you learned that in school? You know, and you can debate the exact wording of what it means. You can debate the exact origin, but the meaning is basic and it's simple and it's as old as politics itself. If you believe, according to Machiavelli, that your cause is important enough, that it's righteous enough, that you want to obtain certain goals, that it's urgent enough, there are no rules, no morals, and no ethics. Truth becomes flexible and there are no standards anymore. And people start telling themselves that anything is acceptable if they can win, if the outcome is important enough to them. This is about winning. This is about the left wing, I'm sorry, but it's about the left-wing Democratic Party wanting to win and using the SPLC, using each other as tools to make sure that they win elections and put out misstatements. And we have to ask, when it become part of the philosophy? Well, in the last administration, we saw a lot of things, an FBI of lies, an FBI of untruths, an FBI of injustice, an FBI that Joe Biden was willing to rely on politically tainted information, some of which came from the SPLC. Bad information. We know now that it was wrong, that it wasn't true at multiple levels. Garland told the AG told us that the greatest threat facing the entire country was domestic violent extremists. But the real threat, the great threat, a great threat to freedom was his own Department of Justice and his own FBI back then. It was scary. If you had a different opinion, guess what, folks? And I'm not trying to address this to you, Mrs. Wiley. I have a right to be conservative. I have a right to a different viewpoint, but there's not one human being up here that supports the Ku Klux Klan. None of us like it. I bet you there's nobody in this whole damn room that supports the Ku Klux Klan. Catholics saw the clearest example of this. It was hateful. It was hurtful. They went after Roman Catholic churches. They were going to have undercover agents. Thank God we found the information. It would have been going on. They went after Hindus in my own state of New Jersey. Good, faithful, peaceful, loving people. The FBI went in with guns drawn from bad information that they got. SPLCA supplied a lot of this. The FBI painted them as domestic terrorists. The same thing with parents in school board meetings that were worried about the stuff their own biological children were being taught to them. It is wrong. Catholics aren't extremists. Concerned parents aren't extremists. Hindus aren't extremists, but we've seen the pattern before over and over again. We saw it in the abuse of FISA. We saw it when, by the way, tax dollars, questionable sources, FBI, Igor Danchenko, remember that? Hundreds of thousands of dollars paid to him for bad information. We also got bad information from the Southern Poverty Law Center, all for politics to go after Republicans. That's the elephant in the room. That's what people don't want to talk about, but that's the real deal. If you were conservative, and no, Charlie Kirk was not a terrorist. If you just sat and listened to what he said, you might not agree with it. He was just a very faithful, conservative person. It's his right. And now the worst of all of it, though, is that we find the Southern Poverty Law Center is just one more tool. I think it started out good. I think they wanted to do good things. I think there are still people in there that want to do good things, but it's been used in a way that is perverse and awful to get political goals of a political party accomplished. Machiavelli through and through. It's pretty damn amazing. People donated money believing they were helping good causes, helping vulnerable people, and in the beginning they were. Nobody wants racism. Nobody up here in this room wants racism. Nobody wants to hurt anybody. Nobody wants to hate anybody. But the Southern Poverty Law Center and the work that they've done in recent times has actually caused more hate, more hurt, and more problems. They gave money to the KKK. I don't give a how you approach it, what you say about it, it's a bad thing. I just got some real quick questions because I know I'm running out of time. Mr. Perkins, should the Southern Poverty Law Center have had such a high level of influence in federal agencies?
No.
No. Mr. O'Neill?
No, in fact, with the FBI memo, the SPLC has suggested that the Catechism of the Catholic Church is itself a hateful document.
It's unbelievable. I'm a Roman Catholic. I resent that, Ms. Wiley. I'm not a hateful person. I would never hurt anybody. I resent that. And so do a lot of Catholics, and so do a lot of people of faith. They have a right to.
Mr. Chairman, if we're going to run over time,
No.
can we talk about the
Wait,
president's attack on the Pope?
How does an organization?
Is that part of your presentation?
Last question, then I'm done.
And very
How does an
lenient with
organization
time, and
maintain
gentleman
credibility
from New Jersey controls the time.
as
Gentleman
an
can ask
authority
his
on
last question.
I'm losing my time here, but how does an organization maintain credibility as an authority on extremism if there's serious concerns being raised about its own extremism, its own judgment, and its own activities? Real quick, Mr. O'Neill, Mr. Perkins. And Dr. Swain, how about you go?
I can say that that by 2009, they had already deviated and started targeting conservatives. And I would say that they were so effective at eliminating hate groups that they had to find new people to label new organizations. That's the problem.
You're right. Go back to your original mission.
Mr.
I have a
Perkins?
few UCs.
Okay. Do you see them? I
And
think
Mr. Chairman, point of order, just so we're clear, that was 1 minute over as we move into Ms. Balance
we've
time.
been very lenient with the time.
I just want to make sure we're doing it equally,
Hang on,
that's all.
member, so
Equal
it's-
rights, that's all.
Moving to
I have a
UCs from Mr. Van Drew, UCs from the
I have a
gentleman from
UC
Pennsylvania,
April
and then we're
20
actually going to go vote, and then we'll come back once votes are completed. Gentleman from New Jersey, UC.
I have a UC from Moms for Liberty, and it is entitled "The Justice Department Announced Indictment Against Southern Poverty Law Center." A
Okay.
UC from Tyler O'Neill on 2026, Democrats beclown themselves by defending SPLC.
Objection.
Another one from Mr. O'Neill. However bad you think Biden's DOJ was, new documents show it was even worse. Thank you, Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a unanimous consent request to introduce an article from the Hill dated September 17th, 2025. DOJ quietly removes studies showing right-wing attacks outpace those by the left.
Objection.
An article from the Washington Post, November 13, 2019, leaked Stephen Miller email showed Trump's point man on immigration promoted white nationalism, SPLC reports.
Without objection.
White House issued the National Security Presidential Memorandum 7 in September 2025.
Without objection.
And an article from the New Republic, April 2026, the Justice Department sides with the Ku Klux Klan.
Without objection.
And
Thank
I
you.
have two here, massacre at Pittsburgh Synagogue tied to anti-refugee sentiment, and
Objection.
Buffalo Shooters Manifesto promotes great replacement theory, anti-Semitism.
Without objection.
Can I go?
The committee will be in recess for a short period of time. The reason we have to leave now is I do know that there's one 15-minute vote, and then the next 5 votes, I think, are 2-minute votes. I don't want to miss that. So we're gonna recess. There's some lunch for you in the back, and then we'll.
And so we're gonna cut to the president. We're gonna cut to the president's speech. Okay. While they're in break, we're gonna cut to the president's speech and see what the president had to say today. Of course, he did his #1 hits. Of course, he did. The #1 hits. Let's see.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That was beautiful. He's a fantastic man. He's a special, very special man. He always has been. And Mark Wayne, thank you. Appreciate it. And hello, cadets. And let me begin by saying a very big congratulations to the class of 2026, special class. It's a true honor to be here on this magnificent day at one of the most prestigious military academies anywhere in the world. And I'm thrilled to become the first president to ever give a second keynote address to this storied institution. I am very proud of that honor. We'll have to try it a third time. We're going to have to try it maybe a third time, too, to keep that record intact. And a few moments from now, every graduate in the field will go forth with a even greater honor, one of the highest distinctions anyone can attain. You'll become commissioned officers in the United States Coast Guard, and our country is hot. This is a great time. Our country is hot. I hate to say it, but I will. A year ago, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, the last administration, we were a dead country. Right now, we're the hottest country anywhere in the world. We're respected all over the world. You saw that with China just recently. You saw that in Venezuela. You saw that right now in Iran. Everything's gone. Their Navy's gone. Their Air Force is gone. Just about everything. The only question is, do we go and finish it up, or are they going to be signing a document? Let's see what happens. But we're a hot country. We're the hottest country anywhere in the world, with the strongest, most powerful military anywhere in the world, and there's nobody close. I want to thank our new Secretary of Homeland Security, Mark Wayne Mullen, a fantastic man, for the introduction, along with Coast Guard Commandant Admiral Kevin Lundry. And he is something. He's a special guy. You know, when you get to that position in the Coast Guard, you're very something. I don't have to ask, gee, how good is he? They have to be very good. It goes with the territory. And the president of the Republic of Palau, Surin Gel Whips Jr., I want to thank you very much. And you're here, and we appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. Over the past 4 years, this class has been mentioned by an exceptional team of professors and coaches and military professionals who have shaped you into leaders. You came with very good quality, but they've shaped you nevertheless. And warriors who revere honor and really honor duty. You honor duty like very few others can even think about it. So let's give a big round of applause to the entire faculty and staff that made this possible. And I especially want to thank Academy Superintendent Rear Admiral Greg Rothrock. Come on, get up here, Greg. Come here. He does a hell of a job. You don't want to mess with him. Don't mess around with him. Thank you very much, Greg. Fantastic. Also, your Assistant Superintendent, Captain Jess Razioks. Where is he? Where? Nice. Very nice. Thank you. Commandant of Cadets, Captain Aaron Casabant. Hi, Aaron. Hi, Aaron. Command Master Chief Evan Birch. Evan, where are you, Evan? Good job up here, Evan. It's never easy, Evan, up here, right? You feel more comfortable in the water. And class advisor Christy Rose. Christy.
We see what the partisan speech is all about. Let's see what it's about. We got to pull him out of here because he loves to talk. Let's see. Introducing all the people.
But it actually, what we didn't expect, it made your recruiting much better because you're able to now recruit the top people that really have a chance of getting into professional sports. And one of the reasons you have such good teams. We also have your all-time leader in points in the assist.
Still introducing.
Over. underway is the only way, and that's a pretty cool statement. And you know, I don't know if you know this, but I was
No, we don't care.
under this administration,
That's-
we don't apologize for American power or wealth. What we do really is we want to maximize it. We take advantage of it. We unleash it. And we wield it to pursue our country's glorious destiny and our beautiful American dream. We have the American dream back. You didn't hear about the American dream too much for 4 years. And now the American dream is back. This is truly the golden age of America. We are in now the golden age. We have more production, more people. We have more.
So why do we have more people in poverty than we've ever had in our country's history? Why do we have more people who can't afford rent, groceries, food, car payments more than any other time in our history? And we're 2 years into this administration. And people are way worse than where they were 2 years ago. So we're not in any kind of golden age of the United States. I think, in fact, that we're breaking down programs and all kinds of things that make us great. So where is this coming from?
More people working today than at any time in the history of our country by far. We have more people having great jobs today than at any time in the history of our country. Our country is
But you don't
respected all
consider-
over the world.
Right.
The men and women of the Coast Guard have a vital role to play in this resurgence. This is a great resurgence. We have $18 trillion being invested in the United States. That's many, many times more than ever before. In fact, you'd have to go back more than 10 years. Another country a long time ago had 3 trillion. We have 18 trillion. The last administration for 4 years had less than 1 trillion. We have $18 trillion being invested in our country in 11 months because the numbers for the 12th have not come up. So that's going to increase it yet further. So that's an honor. It's a great honor. To me, that's something special. We're building plants, auto plants, every kind of plant you can imagine all over the country. And they're coming in from Canada. They're leaving other countries. They stole our auto business. They stole our chip business. We'll have close to 50.
They stole our chip business. You gave away our chip business to China, sir. You gave it away. Well, see, I thought it would be interesting to listen to him, but he has no new material. And all of the material that he comes up with and talks about has made our country or put our country in peril. As much as we can listen or talk, or hear him talk about what's good about America, we have to understand that our country has went and been downgraded since this president has become president because of his policies. Not because of him, but because of his policies. And we are less everything since we have been under the leadership of this president. Just is what it is.
2% of the chip business by the time I leave. And right now we have none practically. And we'll have, it was taken by other places. It was taken by Taiwan. I'm not knocking them. I'm saying if they can get away with it. But if you had the right.
Y'all do know this president sold China, or was it Taiwan? He sold our stake in chips. I think it was. I'm not sure what exactly he did, but he bet against the chip market here in the United States. And now we practically got sold out. We got scammed by this president.
Right president, that would have never happened. Wouldn't have been allowed to have happened. You would have put tariffs on and you say, that's okay, you can steal our business, but if you're going to sell, if you think you're selling those chips back into us with no tax, you can forget it. And if we did that, we wouldn't have lost those businesses, the autos, the chips, the semiconductors. All of that would be here, but it's all pouring back into our country right now because of the word tariff. As you know, one of my favorite words, I got into big trouble. I said, this is my favorite word in the dictionary, my favorite word, the word tariff. And the fake news, look at all of them back there. They said,
why do you think he got into trouble by using tariffs? Why does he think he got into trouble? Why does he think that his approval rating is where it's at? It has nothing to do with the American people. It has to do with your policies. You and the Republican administration doing things that the American people don't want. This is why the ratings for the Republicans are in the tank. I already explained to you guys the Republicans don't want to govern. They just want the power and the money. That's evidenced by all the scamming and skating around the law that this administration does. They start wars, they give tax cuts, and they give away money. And wait a minute, what's the third thing? They start war, they give tax cuts, and they crash the economy. Those are the three things that Donald Trump did his first term, that he's doing the second term to the detriment. We couldn't afford the policies that President Trump tried to enact. We couldn't afford them. We couldn't afford to do that when we were recovering from COVID. We had to get back on track by COVID. And Biden was putting us on track. Biden got us out of the ditch. And President Trump put us back into the ditch. So it is what it is. If you look at the numbers, that's what it is.
What about God? What about wife, family? What about other things like Bible? So I was in deep trouble because I said tariff is my favorite. So I made it number 5, and now I'm okay. Now I'm okay. They think I'm kidding, but they gave me a hard time. But with your help, we're reasserting one of the most time-honored principles of our national security, that the American dominance in Western Hemisphere will not be threatened under any circumstance. As an example, we will not let Iran have a nuclear weapon. That's all. It's very simple. We will not let that happen. And we have great support. You wouldn't know that by reading the fake news, but we have great support. People don't want them to have a nuclear weapon, and they will not have a nuclear weapon, and they want to make a deal so badly. We'll see what happens, but we hit them very hard. But we may have to hit them even harder, but maybe not. But we're not going to let Iran have a nuclear weapon and blow up the entire Middle East, Israel, the entire Middle East, and then come here for you. Not going to happen. So just as no family can be truly secure in a violent neighborhood, we will not allow chaos, instability, or danger to fester in America's own backyard. We're not going to let it happen. One of the reasons we have Mark Wayne, and one of the reasons that I feel so good about things, he's a tough cookie. You know, he was a great fighter, too. A great fighter. He was a tough cookie and a very successful fighter. And sons are all-American fighters, so they have good genetics in that family. But Mark Wayne is a tough guy I always say he's a tough guy with a great heart. And that's a good combination. So from the Gulf of America to the frozen waters of the Arctic, from the shores of Havana to the banks of the Panama Canal, we will drive out the forces of lawlessness and crime and foreign encroachment, just like we've been doing. You know, we have only 3% coming in. We were getting tremendous, you would understand this because you were involved in this. We're having tremendous amounts of drugs brought in by sea, by ocean, by water. And a tremendous amount. And we've now reduced that to 3%. So it was a big percentage, and now it's all the way down to 3%. And we've hit them very hard, as you know. Not that something we wanted to do. And we never miss. We never miss. We hit them very hard. And actually, people are trying to figure out who are the 3%, because they happen to be the bravest people perhaps anywhere in the world. The 3% that's left, but I don't even think they have 3%. We virtually stopped it. And now we're going to stop the drugs coming in by land, and that's the easy one to do. That's the easy one. I want to thank the coach.
And that's the thing. Do you honestly believe us having this kind of issue in the United States is the most important thing? Right now, the most important thing to our country is for us to help finance the things that we need around this country. To help the American people is the most important thing that needs to be done. We have always had a war against drugs, a war against border, war against all of that. But never have we had this much of an issue with people living, making a decent wage, and surviving. I think the American people are more important than whatever this president is talking about safety-wise or money-wise or war-wise. I think American people are more important. I think that's the most important thing that we need to be talking about right now. And please, Put it in the comment section. I'd appreciate it. What do you think is the most important thing that we should be talking about, we should be protecting, we should be doing? I think it's the American people. The American people need our help. Nobody wants to talk about the war. Nobody wants the war. Nobody wants to talk about tariffs. Nobody wants the tariffs. American people want to be helped. And we can help the American people by doing a lot of things, specifically by voting. Because right now, the people that are in charge of our country are not listening to the regular, everyday, ordinary American. And the regular, everyday, ordinary American is hurting. And we need help with health insurance, food, gas, rent, you name it. The American people are hurting. And nobody cares about things that you all want to talk about. We want to talk about the things that hurt the American people. So please put it in the comment section. What do you think is more important? I think we took care of most of the things that are more important. I think now it's time to focus on national concerns, United States concerns. Okay? I think it's time to concentrate on the American people because the American people are drowning and it's an issue. I have a show tonight. We have the 10 o'clock show. Please show up, like, share, subscribe. I appreciate it. And I will see you tonight at 10 o'clock. Thank you. I appreciate all of y'all for showing up today. I appreciate it.